Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Cannabis Chat. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder and host of Cannabis Chat, and we'll be here for the next 2 hours or so. And we've got 3 great interviews for you, plus an update on some of the news items of the last 48 hours, and maybe even a tease or two of some of the other exciting things that we're doing over here at Pro Cannabis Media. A reminder, our chat room is open. I have access to the chat room. So if you want to poke fun, have some fun, ask me a question. If I can answer it, I'll answer it. We can engage in whatever capacity you might want to engage in, as long as it's, something we can talk about. But let me first bring you up to date on a few news items. That would be 5 for 5. That's all I got to say is 5 for 5. All 5 ballot initiatives in 5 different states, all passed. So you've got legal adult use cannabis in Montana. You've got both medical and adult use recreational passing in South Dakota. And if anybody has been following Pro Cannabis Media over the last year or two, one of the people that we talked to is a very happy person today. Her name is Melissa Metley, and basically this is what she said about the passing of these ballot initiatives. What we really support is that it creates 2 distinct pathways to a shared goal, and it keeps those 2 pathways separate so that our medical program for our patients will always be there. It will never get absorbed by the adult use market, and it puts both of them into the Constitution. And she was the executive director of the new approach for South Dakota towards cannabis. And we congratulate Melissa Metley and her whole crew and her family, everybody out there. And they are the first state to vote in adult use, recreational use of cannabis, and a medicinal program at the same time. So congrats to them. Arizona, I feel like I'm like doing a roll call. Arizona approves adult use recreational cannabis by a 60-40 margin. Mississippi passes their medical marijuana program. Unbelievable that Mississippi would do it, but they got it done. And the big winner, and now Massachusetts does have another state on the East Coast to be comrades with. That would be the state of New Jersey, the state that I was actually born in. That's right, I was actually born in Newark, New Jersey in 1957. Do the math, you know how old I am. And that's 5 for 5, people, and that's pretty amazing when you get right down to it, that despite the environment that politics has taken on over the last 24 hours and perhaps over the last few years or so, when it comes to cannabis, people come out to vote and they support it. And I suppose that's one of the reasons why the guys down in Washington, D.C. actually started their podcast called Vote Pro Pot Podcast. Vote Pro Podcast. Anyway, those guys will be doing their thing as well. You might have just watched a webinar, an educational webinar from our friends from Emerald Media Group. And we will be continuing to filter in new programs here on Pro Cannabis Media. We already have the Green Nurse Show. And I talked with Mark Worcester, Nurse Mark, and Sherry Tutkus. They are the Green Nurse Group, and they do 3 different shows a week, almost as many as we do here on Pro Cannabis Media. And we'll be repurposing them, dressing them up, and sharing them with our following as well. One more little news item. This just broke since we are live in the studio at this moment in time on Wednesday, November 4th. I am dating it, but we are live. And the former Vice President, Democratic nominee for President, Joe Biden, has won Wisconsin, according to the Associated Press. So your electoral scoreboard, I feel like I'm doing sports again, I get it. The Biden team, 248. Remember, he needs 270 to get in. And President Trump, 214, he too needs 270 to get in. Now, as you might expect, this is not going to end once the Electoral College, once one of these two candidates gets enough electoral college votes, because the Trump camp has already said they will be challenging the result of Wisconsin and asking for a recount. In fact, I think they're going to be asking a recount and suing people probably for the rest of the century, as far as we know, because this is what he does and this is what he's been doing. So let's leave it at that. And yes, the counting continues on all those other states that are still being contested and counted. All those absentee votes that have been, they didn't even start counting them until after the polls closed. So there's a lot of media people out there that are working on 0 hours sleep right now. I would not be one of them, because I'm no longer an official member of the media. I am a talk show host and the founder of a pro-cannabis media network, and I do make that distinction. I think I mentioned that we've got 3 great interviews. Let me tell you about who they are. One is coming up in about, 12 minutes or so, 14 minutes or so, 15 minutes or so, is with a gentleman by the name of Ulysses Youngblood. He's from Clark University. He's an entrepreneur, an adjunct instructor. He's involved with a clothing line, and he's also applied for a social equity delivery license. He's an interesting character. He actually played football at Assumption College, and then he became Mr. Entrepreneur. He has some very interesting personal stories that he will be sharing with us at that time. And we look forward to talking with Ulysses Youngblood. He also has a member of our staff in one of his classes. So we asked him, what kind of a student is that guy, David Monty? Just for the record, I did ask him that. So we'll get that answer. I'm sure you want to tune in for that. At the top of the hour, at approximately 5 o'clock or so, we will talk with Dr. Bridget Williams. She is CEO of the Green Harvest Health Group, and she is also an instructor at the Cleveland School of Cannabis. We are friends with the Cleveland School of Cannabis, and we have a great opportunity to talk to as many faculty members there as we possibly can. This, of course, is our Professor Weed Wednesday show, and we will always have educators from all over the United States who are teaching cannabis either in their communities, at universities, in their online courses. We all recognize here that it is all about educating people about cannabis. And it was so funny, I was looking at last week's show. We were talking with Beth Waterfall, who's the director of the Elevate Northeast Group, which is an educational program. She's involved with the development of curriculum at the Holyoke Community College. Beth is definitely someone I've known for a couple of years now. She was on the In the Weed show with me back in the first year. And she made a great comment about experts. She said there are no experts in the cannabis space. Now, that may be true or maybe not true. There are certainly people who believe that they are expert in the cannabis space. And I can explain more about that a little bit later on the show, but we're looking for experts, or at least people who think they're experts. And by the way, you don't have to be experts in the cannabis space. There are so many other MRBs out there, marijuana-related businesses, that do business with the cannabis industry, like Pro Cannabis Media. And we want to talk to them because, you know what, if you're an insurance guy, like Charles River Insurance's Bill Perrier, he's one of our friends and he's in our little experts club, okay? And if you are in the cannabis business and you're starting up a business and you know you have to get insurance, where do you go? Well, if you follow us or keep track of who we're involved with, sure enough, I would call Bill Perrier, Charles River Insurance. And right on YouTube or on Facebook, you can find that on our website. I do an interview with Bill. He puts his cell phone up there. I'm going out on a limb that some of you actually know and have heard of this thing called Google. And I'm sure if you Google Bill Perrier, like the water, Charles River Insurance, you'll get his contact info. You can get to him, and he will answer your questions about cannabis insurance. Now, we also have an accountant, Accounting Buds. His name is Rick Leneve. These are our experts. He's an expert in accounting because he's a CPA, and he's been doing it for many years. He's assisted CFOs. We really like Rick and his company, Accounting Buds, and Rick is our accounting expert. And we will be talking with Rick. We already have talked with Rick once. We'll be talking with him again as we get closer and closer to more interesting items that might be changing in the cannabis space now that 5 states have brought in cannabis inside their borders, or at least the voters have spoken, and they want a medicinal program, a medical program, and or some, like New Jersey, adult use recreation. That market will be opening as well. So that's at 5 o'clock with Dr. Bridget Williams. And then at 5:30, I don't know if you've ever heard of the Oaksterdam University out of Oakland, California. Pretty sure they were one of the first, they claim to be the first, cannabis education school, university. And I believe it was 2007, if my memory serves me right, when I was looking up and doing some due diligence. And the Dean of Faculty will be joining us. Her name is Natalie Darves. I'm assuming it's Darves. That's phonetic. I can't quite, Darv? It could be like Brett Favre, and it could be Natalie Darves. That's what we're going to go with. Anyway, she's the Dean of Faculty, and she'll talk all about the curriculum at Oaksterdam University. I know that she knows the faculty there because, after all, she's the Dean of Faculty. And that will be coming up at 5:30 in this show, which is a little over an hour and 15 minutes or so. And a reminder, we still do our weekly news show here with Kurt Dalton of Cannabis.net. Every Thursday evening, we put it together. We get reports from Deborah Borchardt from the Green Market Report out of New York. We get the DC report from the Vote Pro podcast guys and Phil Adams. And we go north of the border to Solomon, Israel, to get the Canadian Cannabis Report. And he's a reporter for the MJ Biz Daily International Bureau up there in Canada. Now, we also have added a new member to our reporting team, and we're getting the Maine report. That's right. The Maine man himself, Rye Russell, gives us the Maine report every week on our Weed Talk News show. And of course, Maine now joins Vermont, Massachusetts as legal adult use recreational states. Right now, Connecticut is medicinal only, Rhode Island, medicinal only. But you know, those days, that's just the beginning of the changes that might be happening in the cannabis space, depending on the results of the balance of power in the Senate, in the House, and of course in the executive branch in the White House as well. Now, there is one other news item. Certainly a big day for the cannabis community. You know, they were very, very excited. I was getting alerts all morning long, actually. I couldn't find anybody on any of the regular networks, I guess, your big networks, your Foxes and your CNNs and your MSNBCs and your NBCs and your ABCs and your CBS. Did I leave anybody out? NECN, we'll throw them in there because I actually watch a little bit of that one too because they do a great job with regional coverage. And I was kind of hoping that maybe they might actually report on the cannabis scene, but no, I didn't find any of it. But those who follow all the newsletters that we get here at Pro Cannabis Media, we got inundated with alerts, and we congratulate all those state initiatives. You know, a lot of people work very hard on moving the political process forward when the legislatures won't touch it or don't understand it enough to touch it, so they wait for ballot initiatives. And you know, in New York State, what's going on now, Governor Andrew Cuomo has legalization of adult use recreational cannabis in his budget for 2021. And he tried to get it done last year, couldn't get it done. He's going to try it again this year. And now that New Jersey did it, you know, the New York legislature is not going to want Massachusetts, which touches their border, Vermont, which touches their border, and New Jersey, which touches their border, to have adult use recreational cannabis available because it's a relatively short ride from New York to any of those states, unless, of course, you're in Buffalo, and then it's much easier to go to Canada. Just saying, just in case you're looking for the legal way to purchase cannabis. But here is the big news from Massachusetts. a milestone has been reached. And I'll tell you, it's pretty amazing. 4 years to the day, that would be November 3rd, 2016, unless it was November 2nd, 2016. Massachusetts voters passed Question 4, which paved the way for the adult use of cannabis here in Massachusetts. 4 years later, Massachusetts cannabis sales have eclipsed $1 billion. That's $1 billion sold in non-medical cannabis sales. That does not include the medicinal market in Massachusetts. There are 80 dispensaries in Massachusetts, and they had $1,521,905 sold as of October 30th. So that's pretty amazing, and we congratulate pretty much everybody in this space in Massachusetts, because it really does take a village to get this off the ground. You have to form the Cannabis Control Commission. You move from the medical side of things where the Department of Public Health was involved when it was just medicinal, and now you have to create a new set of regulations and deal with all the NIMBY people, the not in my backyard people. Anyway, this is what Steve Hoffman, this is his quote. He's the commissioner of the Cannabis Control Commission in Massachusetts. This sales milestone represents licensees' ability to successfully support a safe, accessible, and effective adult use industry. And I am pleased the resulting tax benefits will have a significant impact on the communities throughout the Commonwealth. These numbers also speak to commission licensing and enforcement staff working around the clock to make sure that these businesses and their products comply with all of our regulations, his regulations, especially the health and safety provisions. Through June, Massachusetts has reported $122 million in tax revenue, and the state is on pace to collect $200 million in taxes, I believe, by the end of the calendar year. So those are some serious numbers in Massachusetts. You can only think that the 5 states now that have paved the way for this new market to open up, they too will be reaping the tax benefits that have been generated from this industry, the jobs that have been generated from this industry. And remember, it's only beginning, okay? I mean, I have to do the quick count there, but I'll come back with that. But we know that New Jersey is now the second East Coast state to legalize adult use recreation. So congratulations to everybody who worked on that. It is coming up on our first break. It always comes at 4:20, 20 past 4. Those in the cannabis universe, this is a code. Some people know what the 420 code is, some people don't. So I am here to enlighten you about the true story about the Waldos. That was the nickname of a few high school kids from San Rafael, California in 1971 who used to meet after school at 4:20 at the Louis Pasteur statue and catch a buzz. Now, eventually, because it was a regular thing and people were talking about it in that community, the law enforcement community got involved, figured out what they were doing at 20 past 4, and they picked up that call of 420 and used it. Public consumption of cannabis going on. There's a 420 at the corner of Main and Walnut. Get it? That's how it got picked up. And now everybody in the cannabis community, cannabis culture, knows that April 20th and 20 past 4 is a time to partake and enjoy. Now, we do not partake and enjoy during this break, but if you are watching this at home and you have a license to do that or a card to do that, or just don't tell me about it, that's fine too. Enjoy. I do. Well, I get to introduce Shanty by Jonathan Edwards because that song is the song that my group of people starting in the 70s in the greater Boston area used to listen to on the radio. Whenever we heard it, we used it as an excuse to go catch a buzz. So for now, we take a little bit of a break. We'll be back with more of Cannabis Chat after our 420 celebration. Enjoy Shanty.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 1900. I've forgotten. had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just, like every other night, just going to lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm gonna sit down in my rented car, I'm gonna jam it into drive. Gonna head on out and play at WSCA with Sean, I'm glad I'm alive. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Every night and day, we're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Nice. It's Friday. Thank God. Thank God Jonathan Edwards is joining us live in the WSCA studios.
Sir, correct?
I do. Absolutely. I teach an entrepreneurship class, actually two entrepreneurship class under the School of Management. And then I also teach a few cannabis courses that's under the Masters of Public Administration, which is a graduate level course.
There you go. Do you want to give us a few names of those courses that you are an instructor of?
Yeah. So the first one is Art of the Pitch, and that is more or less a sales class. And then I just wrapped up another course, which is called, what's the other course? Creating a Movement, which is more of a marketing class. And then in the springtime, I'll be teaching a capital raising finance class. And then I developed this summer and for this semester a social equity class in cannabis. I also taught a regulatory framework class in cannabis. So the cannabis classes are graduate level, like I said, under the Masters of Public Administrations here at Clark. So it's cool to be in two different schools, you know, policy and business, but I'm definitely a business guy through and through.
I want to ask how challenging it was for you to pitch those courses. And of course, they know that you're involved with the cannabis world. So how challenging was that?
It wasn't challenging at all, to be honest with you. I would say for the entrepreneurship. In fact, let me back it up. So I got involved with Clark through cannabis. I got asked, once we got our host agreement here in the city of Worcester, there's a really good guy, his name's Jacob Sanders, who was a graduate student here at Clark, as well as working in the city of Worcester under the city manager's office. So once we had signed a host agreement with the city, he was like, hey, it'd be great for you to be interviewed for this class that I'm developing. And that class he was developing was for the master's, the certificate program that Clark has. So they already had, you know what I mean, like a program for cannabis. Mm-hmm. And then once I realized that there was a need for him to interview me, I saw that there was a need for entrepreneurship classes in terms of adjunct professors as well. So yeah, Clark was very open to cannabis because they had a program going on before I got involved.
And you mentioned you're part of the social equity applicant pool, the economic empowerment pool in the state of Massachusetts. And you did kind of hint that you actually have one of those valuable delivery licenses. Is that accurate?
So we have a certificate at this point. Okay. We have a certificate, and yes, but we will be licensed with it. There's absolutely no question.
And as we both know, the exact regulations and rules are still being ironed out by the Cannabis Control Commission, some influential others in this process, let's just say. Where do you stand on what you would like to see as far as the abilities to have a viable a viable business with that delivery license?
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, it is a little bit different because we do have a manufacturer's license, provisional license. We do have a retail license, and we're in the middle of doing a build out right now as we speak, 5 miles down the road from Clark University here. So I will be open and say that we're in the middle. I know some of those guys that are special interests in saying, hey, we don't want all this power for delivery. But then I know businesses that are social equity, economic empowerment, and this is their way in, right? Mm-hmm. Is to get a delivery license. So my gut tells me that the barrier should be lowered, no question about it, right? So that means being able to buy wholesale. I would love to see some packaging components thrown in there. But we know that on the other end of it, we have some groups that want to basically peel those ideas back. So,
or at least adapt them. Do you find that you're running up against a brick wall at this point, or do you think there's some movement here?
So me personally, man, I run through brick walls. But like I said, it's for us, it's different, man, because I trust me, I do know some big money guys here in Worcester, and they're like, we don't want this, right? Because it's going to cut into our profits for retail. But then me, I'm like, yes, I'm building out a retailer, but I'm an EE. We're going to have a delivery license. So, put it this way, Major Bloom, me and Lori's business is positioned to outlast any decision. And I mean, it's just honestly just a lot of faith and, the fate that just the way things rolled out this way that we're positioned to outlast it.
Well, as you know, I've met Lori Lucien, your partner there, and I've always enjoyed her passion for this industry and the movement and all this, and I think it's great that you're already established in Worcester. There are quite a few other brick and mortar dispensaries, adult use dispensaries, or wait, as you like to call them, establishments. Is that right?
No, we are the establishment because it's not just retail.
Gotcha.
Right. So right. Our house is the establishment.
I get you. I understand that. And in that establishment, will you be showcasing some of your clothing line?
That's a great question. So there's room for it. I think that there's room for it, especially some of the partners that we work with. And I'm just a kid of the culture, right? So I love hats, bandanas, t-shirts, hoodies, man. Like, so I think there's room for it, definitely. So showcasing is a good way to put it. Absolutely.
And
I'm saying yes to that.
okay, cool. And I'm also recognizing that there's going to be some competition amongst the Worcester area establishments that
Right.
are selling their wares, if you will.
Really?
How are you going to differentiate what you do? And obviously, I'm going to guess showcasing your clothing line might be a good way for you to differentiate, right?
So when you say showcasing, you said what competitors?
Yeah,
When
now
I-
how are you going to compete with those other
Gotcha.
dispensaries
Yeah.
in the Worcester area? How do
Yeah.
you differentiate why people should come to your place rather
Right.
than their place?
That's a great question. And honestly, the first thing that comes to mind when you say competition is a blue ocean mindset. I don't think, are you familiar with that? Blue
No,
ocean.
but explain
Red
that to me because you are a very deep. You've got all these quotes of Michael Jordan and Albert Einstein. I did some research on you.
Oh, it's my website you're talking about.
Yeah.
Those are some of my favorite people. But yeah, blue ocean mindset is really looking at competition as it exists, is that it's a wide range, right? Meaning that if you're in a blue ocean, like there's no end to it. Like everything looks, endless. Where red ocean is more cutthroat, like, hey, this is very rigid, maybe like a price war, different tactics that are involved with red ocean and it really competing in that sphere. I think if all of us in Worcester, and not only just Worcester, in the state, look at it from a blue ocean mindset, meaning that we all have our own lane, then I know, that's the way that is better for consumers, to be honest with you. So for us, in Lori and I, for us, it starts with being connected to the community and seeing that we know that we're much different than many other business owners. Very involved in the community. I live 5 minutes away from the facility that here in Worcester. I got initiated by the Worcester Police 5 minutes down the road. They beat my ass a couple of years ago. So for me, this is a full circle of basically what's going on in the world. Right, we are in some issues sometimes that are very socially pressing, especially as what it means for people of color. And not only in cannabis, but just in general. So for us, is really being able to tell that story of how the social atmosphere that we're in, and putting it in front of consumers to know that they're doing business with a great group rather than a special interest group, an out-of-state group, a multi-state operator. That's the story, is really connecting with the community through authenticity. And I have no better way to connect with the community than to tell real stories.
Would you like to expound a little bit on what happened with the Worcester law
Oh,
enforcement?
absolutely. I love talking about it.
Tell me.
So this is my second home. And I say this to people that I got initiated here because I'm from Bridgeport, Connecticut. I moved here in 2006 to go to Assumption College, to play football more specifically.
Yep.
But I ended up getting kicked out of Assumption College because of weed-related things, right? Like they said my dorm room smelled like weed. They kicked me off my campus. Then I ended up moving to Salisbury Estates, if you're familiar, which is not too far from our location.
Yep.
And I got the cops called on me and my friends. I ended up getting arrested for disturbing the peace. And then I also got police brutality. They beat me up. And this was all in like 2007 or so. Yeah, man. So the fact that I got kicked out of college for something weed related, the fact that I was a part of police brutality, but then here we are 13 years later. Here I'm a professor in the same city. You know what I mean? I have a business coming up in the same city. That to me answers the question of differentiation. It's the authenticity being rooted here in the community, right? Like I know some of the guys that we've grown up with are multi-billion-dollar corporations. You know what I mean? So like, yeah, it's just a little different, right? I'm not hiring an analyst to do the work. It's me and Lori and my intern Jill over here.
Well, I know how smart Laurie is, and I'm going to just go on a limb based on the quotes that you have on your website. You're pretty deep, man. You really are. I guarantee you that having Albert Einstein, Michael Jordan,
Right.
Nipsey Hussle, who I had no idea who it is, but now I do know who it is. But it's the Dr. Seuss quote that really hit home with me. Now I'm going to read it, okay?
Yeah,
And
please do.
I want to talk. I want to talk to you about it because I embrace my weirdness. It is definitely one of the things that gives me my identity, my personality, and I really don't care. But this is what it says. This is Dr. Seuss talking, not necessarily Ulysses Youngblood, but he picked this quote.
Yeah.
We are all a little weird, and life's a little weird. And when we find someone whose weirdness is compatible with ours, we join up with them and fall in mutual weirdness and call it love. I think that is a beautiful quote.
I agree, 100%.
So who's
Right.
weird in your life?
Everybody, my wife, my mom, my business partner, my intern. We're all weird.
Basically, the word is synonymous with unique,
Right,
right?
100%. Yeah,
Because if you stand out, and some people who judge you, and by the way, I'm not big on judging anybody, okay?
absolutely.
But you stand out for some reason, people might think that's unique
Right.
or even label it weird, depending on why you're standing out. Let's just be honest here.
Yeah.
That being said, it's a challenge for you just walking down the street. If I was walking down the street and you were walking down the street and a police car happened to drive by, who's going to get picked on? Who's going to get stopped and say, hey, what you doing? Or right?
I think the difference is that we know the answer to that question. We're trying to fix that, right?
Right.
And especially when it comes to cannabis, it's like, oh, we all know the statistics. Black people get arrested at exponentially, more rates depending on what county that you're in and what state, but it's really addressing those challenges with solutions, because it's tired to keep repeating the same thing over and over again. It's like, what are we doing to make things better at this point,
Well, I will say this. Without knowing the result of the presidential election yet, because we are live at this point, we do know that the cannabis industry picked up 5 for 5 on their ballot questions yesterday. And that's a huge win for this industry because it means, I believe it's 3 more states are now adult use legal and 2 more add in for medical. I think that was the score. And South Dakota was the first state to get both medical and recreational passed on the ballot. So there's kind of I'm guessing 420 on Wednesday is going to be a big celebration.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah.
Are you encouraged with those results as an entrepreneur and a businessman? Are we going to break down the stigma finally, you think?
Yeah, well, I think that the stigma has been there. It's just, not existing. Oh, well, I shouldn't say not existing. I think some of the studies we look at, 60% or 65% of people in the United States are for legalization. So, the stigma is definitely changing. It's more about policy and politics at this point,
And I don't like politics, just in case you haven't figured that one out yet.
Yeah, me either. We're friends. We're together on that, man.
Fair enough. Well, I think we're more together than you think we are, Ulysses. Okay, first of all, our last names are derivatives of each other, right? I mean, I could be a young blood.
Let's go. Add it to the end. See what people think of you.
What is the schedule? What do you've got? You got some goals for when you think you're going to be operational and all this?
Absolutely. And it's funny you bring that up because I spoke with my GC today, and we'll probably be done with construction come January, February. And, after the construction is done, we have to have a host of inspections on the local level and the state level. So without the doubt, the goal would be, end of February, Marches. I would say February.
What's the one thing you'd like to see in the Massachusetts area when it comes to cannabis?
One thing. Wow. I would have to say being in the economic empowerment program, and I could say the same for social equity. I think all the social programs have a good intention. I think that there needs to be some change around, basically who it's intended to, improve and help out. Because I say that and going back to the point of, being in Worcester where we've been up against, billion-dollar corporations, having expedited licensing is cool, but we still have to go through everything else that all other businesses have to go through. Host agreement, special permit, construction permitting, and everything that we just mentioned costs money. You know what I mean? So I think the big challenge is funding. I mean, and it seems obvious, literally seems obvious, but it is a challenge for economic empowerment and social equity businesses.
And it's interesting you brought that up, the funding part, which we all know is probably the biggest obstacle to opening and going through the whole regulation process and all that. But I also know how restrictive marketing policies are in this space too. And, besides your sign, look, I'm going to guess that you're going to leverage your entrepreneur spirit and your clothing line as a way to get people into your establishment.
Yeah, I would say there's probably more than it's more, and I talk about this often, is ancillary businesses, right? Or ancillary adjacent, I like to say adjacent services or products. So, I mean, in many cases, that could be music. Cannabis and music culture run, together through and through. Sports, another one that runs to parallel paths. So I think it's more important, and that's why you talk about the clothing and things of that nature. The culture. I think it's more important to focus on those things to help drive the brand, rather than saying, "Hey, we have the highest THC content." You know what I mean? Come get 2 for $25. Like, no, that's not compelling enough for people.
That's right. And besides, if you know something about cannabis these days, it's about the terpenes and the impact with the amount of THC in the plant, right?
I guess, yeah. I'm not a science guy.
Yeah, and by the way, I've interviewed more scientists in the last year and a half than I ever met in my entire life.
That's great. Did you learn anything?
What's that?
Did you learn anything?
Oh, I've learned so much. In fact, they use words I've never even heard before, okay?
Right.
So I tried to ask them to dumb it down to somebody who was a sportscaster and a history major and, was in newsrooms my whole life. So I just try to make it so that they can actually learn how to talk to the public, because not having public service announcements talking about the benefits of this plant and how it can enhance your life still is, I think, is a big factor for the industry. I've been preaching this now for as long as I've had this microphone on again. So I hope that eventually happens, not only in Worcester, but in the entire industry, because there's still so much knowledge out there. People are still learning about this plant, even at the highest scientific level.
Absolutely. It makes me think of when you talk about like layman's terms and understanding the science. There's a great gentleman that you should probably get on this show as well. His name is Gene Ray. And I bring a lot of admiration for him because he's also a black male working in this industry. And I love being around people that know more than me. He is a person that is he's a weed scientist, and I love saying that. And he's, like I said, another young black dude. So I understand when he talks about cannabis, but he's just super knowledgeable when it comes to, laboratory extraction process and things of that nature, the science side of things.
Well, we'd love to interview him because he would be able to educate us on Wednesdays or talk about his science and medicine that he's obviously on Mondays. Those are the two different. We have a Medicinal Monday show and a Professor Weed Wednesday show. So if you make that intro, that would be awesome. Yeah, but speaking 100%. Of, let's talk about the guy who actually made the intro to the two of us, if you don't mind. Was David Monty a student of yours?
He was more than a student, man. He was a leader, to be honest with you. The guy, I think what's really cool about him is I like to understand people's backgrounds. And I know he has a brother that also works in the industry. So I feel like he got a lot of knowledge from his brother, and he brought that into the classroom and talked and spoke so diligently. He's a great writer. I think I told him this, like every assignment that he would pass in, is that I really, to your point, like understood what he was saying when it came to different regulations. It made sense. He made great recommendations. So not just a student, just a leader in the class that we had together.
Well, we certainly are glad that I've finally reached out to him, had an opportunity for him, and he is working with us in the future. And I'll tell him that his professor gave him a good recommendation too.
Absolutely. That's great.
All right, Ulysses Youngblood, how can people find out about you? Tell them about your website, where they can go.
Yeah, absolutely. So you guys can find me. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, Ulysses Youngblood. You guys can find me there. My Instagram is UJ Youngblood. My website, as you had mentioned, Mr. Young, is ujyoungblood.com. And then you can find our business, themajorbloom.com. And then same thing across all platforms, social media, The Major Bloom as well. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, the whole nine.
There you go. I found you pretty easily. And more importantly, do me a favor, call me Jimmy, because when you address me with respect, and I appreciate that because I know that's important to you too, it just makes me feel old. And I have that last name. I embrace my youngness. You know what I'm saying?
Jimmy Young. Does anyone call you James or Jimbo?
Actually, my oldest friends call me James A, because A is my middle initial, and for some reason they just have always liked that. Maybe because they know me better than anybody. I don't know, but I've always was Jimmy on air, and Jimmy is an easy one to remember. And plus, it goes back to the fact that I'm 63 years old, and I want to be as young as I possibly can. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, hang around me. We'll be fine.
Well, you could certainly help me with my style, because I have no style. So I'll be in touch with you about that too, Ulysses.
That's great, man. Well, I appreciate that. And it's weed too, obviously, when those packs come in.
You got it, man.
Hoodies, I'll get you some weed.
Okay, I can try it, I suppose, as long as I'm not working. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Anyway, Ulysses Youngblood, thank you so much for joining us here on Cannabis Chat. And we now are going to take a break, and we're going to kind of wave the flag about some of the accomplishments that we've had over the last year here at Pro Cannabis Media. Don't go away. We've got more coming up.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Well, hello there. Here we are again, another live stream from the new studio of Pro Cannabis Media. This is Cannabis Chat, and I'm Jimmy Young. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Every week, Kurt and I get together to review some of the biggest stories in the cannabis industry. He and I talk about them. We have a few comments, and then we get reports from Canada, New York, and Washington, D.C.
And this week's no different, Jimmy. We finally have Vermont moving toward recreational cannabis with retail opening in their state. We have an old state and a new state, Colorado and Illinois, both setting cannabis sales records in July, as well as multiple efforts to legalize the cannabis plant in America, including our friend Steve D'Angelo getting involved.
But first, let's go to Deborah Borchardt in New York to check on the financial weed scene. Deborah?
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Jimmy. Well, things seem to keep going the wrong way for Charlotte's Web.
Whoa, Jimmy Young, in the weeds on the water this week. We've got the CEO of Kushko, Nick Kovacevic, with me. This guy has built his little company in 6 years from $2 million in sales to $145 million in sales.
We can get this thing to be fully legal here in the next few years, I believe, but it's going to take far longer for the stigma to change.
I think you guys are the pro cannabis story.
And I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Jody Roberts with Eastern Security State, and I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Laura Beener. I'm the president co-founder of The Healing Rose, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. It's been such an integral part of our success here at The Healing Rose.
And you know what? The best media company out there is Pro Cannabis Media. Look out for them. They'll make you famous.
Hi, I'm George, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. I also love Western Mass Hydroponics, where we've got everything you need from seed to bloom to bud, and then to smoke it afterwards.
Hi, welcome back to Cannabis Chat for a Wednesday afternoon. I'm Jimmy Young. I hope you enjoyed that interview with Ulysses Youngblood. We've got another one coming up at the top of the hour. Dr. Bridget Williams, the CEO of Green Harvest Health, will be joining us. She also is an instructor at the Cleveland School of Cannabis with some of our friends out there, and we'll be talking with her in just a few minutes. We also have at the 5:30 mark, about 35 minutes or so from now, a chat with the Dean of Faculty from Oaksterdam University, which is indeed the oldest cannabis school in the country. 2007, doesn't surprise me. I think it's great that they actually had some kind of a educational program at a college or a university at that time, and obviously it's evolved quite a bit. They have 40,000 alums from Oaksterdam University. I do not think they have a football team, however, but they definitely have a lot of alumni. So we'll talk to her at 5:30. So you're right. I wrote Wisconsin, and it's Michigan. Did we say that? No, I said Wisconsin. I was right. Never mind. I went back and checked just to make sure. By the way, when you look at a map, Wisconsin has that Upper Peninsula thing, right? On the other side of one of the Great Lakes. I think it's Lake Superior. Anyway, I always get those mixed up. Michigan and Wisconsin, right? I know one's a W and one's a M, but they're both Big Ten teams, and that always confused me. What can I tell you? I'm easily confused, okay? I can tell you that on Friday, which is our Green Rush show, we do it the same thing. We go live streaming from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., and we have a great show planned. We have Morgan Fox, who comes from the Washington, D.C. area. He is the communications director for the NCIA, which is the National Cannabis Industry Association, a group of industry professionals that help fund the lobbying or the lobbyist effort in Washington, D.C., which, if you know how politics works, it's very important. And of course, they're thrilled with the fact that 5 ballot initiatives all passed for cannabis over the past 48 hours, or maybe it's 24 hours, because the election was yesterday, although it's still going on today because they're still counting ballots. It's probably going to go on for a few more days, weeks, maybe even months after the results will be challenged, I'm sure, and then sorted out and all that neat stuff. But I do not expect, one way or another, it's going to be an interesting ride over the next few weeks when it comes to politics and presidential politics and the election as well. We did talk, let me tell you who else I'm going to have on Friday. Of course, David Rabinovitz, my guy, the Green Rush with David Rabinovitz. That's really the show that we've given him an opportunity to produce, find guests, bring on all of his FODs, friends of David. They filled up that room, that chat room, that Zoom room we had open on Friday, and we expect to have another good crowd on that as well. It does look like we do have. Is that Dr. Bridget Williams I'm seeing?
Yes. Hi, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for being there for us, because, this is what we like to do on Wednesdays is chat about cannabis, and specifically with educators from all over the country. And obviously your affiliation with the Cleveland School of Cannabis helps you, because we love those guys. Yes. And we continue to wave their flag and appreciate you taking the time too. But tell us a little bit about Green Harvest Health and what else you do besides teach at the Cleveland School of Cannabis.
Absolutely. So I'm a family medicine doctor for nearly 20 years. Most of my time was spent at the Cleveland Clinic, and I have my own practice, which is Green Harvest Health. It is the only medical cannabis and life coaching office in Ohio. We have our main office in Columbus, and we have actually our main office outside of Columbus and a satellite office, and we also have a satellite in Cleveland. And so a lot of what I do besides teaching at the Cleveland School of Cannabis is obviously seeing patients for medical cannabis cards, life coaching. We also have a nonprofit where we support the communities in cannabis that support us. And we have our own line of CBD products, which is kind of my passion in creating and developing products to help our patients as well.
This industry is filled with people who want to help others.
Yes.
It's a fascinating thing to me, being on the outside somewhat, looking in on the plant touching and the extraction people and the licensed people and all that. When you give someone a product, and you're an MD too, when you give them a product, they use it, and they get back on the phone with you in a week or 2 weeks later, or whenever the follow-up happens, and they're raving about your products, that reward has to be very special for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I even did because like you said, I usually hear back from them in, a week or a couple of weeks there and realize how much it's helping them. I recently did a CBD meditation yoga event where I gave small samples to the participants. And so they're using it in the moment and then do this hour-long meditation with CBD and yoga, and to actually see how it relaxed them and seeing the effects with the yoga and having them walk out and just be in awe of how much it helped take them to this more relaxed and more peaceful place. It was really special. Most of the time I don't get to see it, in the moment.
Right, but that's and yoga and cannabis have lived hand in hand now. Maybe modern society is just discovering it, but we both know that it's been used for thousands of years, both practices.
Yes.
And now they're being able to extract chemicals, cannabinoids, from that plant, and you're obviously working with CBD only. Are you amazed with what all the different discoveries of new cannabinoids or cannabidiols in the plant, these amazing chemicals, and of course they all have little initials like CBN and CBG, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm fascinated with what this plant offers, right? It is forever giving. And obviously we know a lot about THC. CBD is huge on the market, of course. But when you're looking at these other minor cannabinoids and not only what they offer individually, but when you're putting them all together and using them synergistically and creating that entourage or ensemble effect, you really realize the amazing medicinal properties that cannabis offers. So I think in the future, you're going to see more and more products that are not only CBD, but also have these other cannabinoids either as a small part of it or even, using it more isolated. Currently, we have our gummies are CBD with CBG, as well as we have an isolate that we extracted more CBG and added to it for that added anti-inflammatory and anti-anxiety effect.
Those are really the two biggest categories on the medical side. When you see a patient and you do an intake process with that patient, what is it? Is it chronic pain? Is it sleep? Is it anxiety? Who leads the league in the medical diagnosis department?
Absolutely. So in Ohio, just talking about the categories that you're able to get a medical cannabis card for, number one's always going to be chronic pain, PTSD, and then fibromyalgia. But when you're asking those patients, besides the medical diagnosis that you are using the cannabis for, what other reasons are you using it for? Number one's going to be sleep, and right behind it is anxiety, without a doubt.
Those definitely seem to be the two. That chronic pain, I get it. We had a really interesting talk on Monday with Dr. John McKay. Are you familiar with his work at all? Well, I'll tell you, I personally recommend that interview. I don't normally, yes, I do. I constantly push my own stuff. If you'd like to, I think I recommend that. He's a scientist, and he's fascinating. And we talked about not just the cannabinoids, but also interactions with cannabis and, let's say, Western medicine medications, like your statins or your anticoagulants,
Yes.
as they say in the medical business.
Yes.
Have you ever had any patients that come back to you and say, that didn't go well with my prescription drug?
Right. So it's funny. I write the CBD comprehensive curriculum for the Cleveland School of Cannabis, and this was actually our lecture today. So it's that much more, in the forefront of my mind. But so I haven't really had problems with it because I really do address this right off the bat, that I look at my patients' medications, I tell them what my concerns might be, and also to follow up with their physician to get follow-up blood work just to see where, let's say, their cholesterol levels might be or what have you. One of the reasons why we don't see a lot of problems with it, though, is that when they do the research looking at how CBD or THC might interact with some of these medications, most of the research is on dosages of CBD that might be 150, 300, 600, 900 milligrams, where my average patient is probably taking 25 to 50 milligrams. So they're less likely to have a huge effect with their medications. However, when it comes to blood thinners, they're so finicky that that it can be a little bit more tricky, and we want them to get that checked out right away to make sure that they're not having any problems. But most of the time, they're not taking huge amounts of it, enough to make a huge difference in their other medications, but always stay aware of it.
Right. And of course, because you're dealing with a product that interacts differently with people's endocannabinoid system, I know that, 40 milligrams for me might not do the same thing as 40 milligrams for somebody else or whatever it is. How do you come up with the amount of dosage, especially on the CBD side, not, on the full spectrum hemp CBD, or are you using cannabis sativa with THC to create your stuff?
So we do have a full spectrum tincture, which will have 0.3% THC in it. So it is all of our products are hemp based.
Okay.
I do recommend, obviously, THC products where the patient will have to go to the dispensary to get that.
Right.
But so as far as the dosing when it comes to CBD, it can be a little tricky. There are a lot of factors that weigh into it. The effect that they are looking to achieve. If you have a low amount of pain, we're probably talking about a lower dose, where if you have a lot of higher amount of pain, we're probably going to push that dose up. Also looking at the age of the patient. The older you are, your metabolism tends to be a little bit slower. So we try to inch into that dosage a little bit more carefully, where a younger person can probably handle a higher dosage with fewer side effects. The weight of the patient plays into it as well. So and this is just a few of them, different factors that we look into. And with every patient, we start at a lower dose, sometimes lower than we're expecting for a therapeutic result, and have them increase every couple of days so they can get used to it. And so we want them to use the least amount necessary to achieve the therapeutic effect that they're hoping to get. So that's kind of across the board.
Right. And again, this is the thing that a lot of people just don't get. We're talking about a medicine, we're talking about self-medication, and we're talking about the experience of using yourself as a guinea pig to find out what strain might work best for you, how much of that strain, do you need a little boost of THC to maximize the interaction with the CBD? So it's an ongoing process, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. And so for some patients, this is a little bit more difficult for them to take on because they're so used to set dosages and a time schedule. But what we do at Green Harvest Health is really focus on the education and the empowerment of the patient. So we educate them on listening to their body, paying attention to what CBD or THC actually does and how they respond to it. And then as they understand that relationship, altering the dosages as they see fit. And we're always there to help them, change that and guide them through it.
Again, back to the entourage effect for a second here. I know that, now do you give medical cards? Are you a doctor?
Yes.
You
Yes.
do, right?
So I'm a certified to recommend physician, along with having our own line of CBD products as well.
You don't have, I should have known this. I should have done a little research on this, but I'm going to ask you the question anyway.
Sure.
You don't have any idea how many medical patients are in Ohio, do you?
Oh gosh, I usually do know the number.
Make up one. I'm going to be impressed by it.
What are we talking about? 300,000 or more now? I usually know.
Okay,
You know.
that's all right.
Yeah.
You're not gonna get marked down on your final exam paper. Don't worry about it. I got that covered for you. You know, I appreciate you taking the time. Let's talk a little bit about the life coaching part of your world, because it sounds like you've got the resume you have is quite impressive in so many elements. But I'm getting more and more familiar with life coaching. Are you certified by any of those coaching certificate programs out there?
So I am certified by the Physician Coaching Institute, and that's where I did the majority of my work. Plus, I've done some training with some other groups as well. And the institute that I went to actually trains you in working with professionals. So it's all physicians or people that work in the medical field that get trained to help people that are trying to navigate life a little bit easier.
Yeah, and so do you get into the energy levels in that certification?
So, I mean, like Reiki, or is that what you're
No,
referring
look,
to?
my significant other is an IPEC certified coach. She explains the level 1, 2, 3, up to level 7.
Sure.
I'm starting to learn more and more about it through osmosis. And
Sure.
I've worked with a coach over the last 6 months too, and I found positive results from that. So
Sure.
when someone comes to you and starts asking you about, as a life coach, do you work with people like almost like a psychologist with behavior modifications, or are we strictly looking for tools like CBD or other medications to balance out a person's challenges?
So I would say my patient population, half of them, probably maybe even less, actually use cannabis or CBD. And then the others are cannabis or CBD patients, and we utilize that as part of how they can improve and balance their life. So I don't work in energy levels. I work with people that do that. But what I end up really focusing on is helping patients. We have our Life MD course, basically, or coaching. And so I have a psych degree. I'm certified as a peer counselor during my education. And so I do bring in my medical background, my psychology background, and life coaching to help patients to improve their lives, to have more balance, to have more confidence. People get in their own way quite often, and a lot of the work we do is to help them get out of their own way and to fulfill the dreams and the life that they would like to succeed at. But I have another group of patients that are really medical life coaching. So these are patients that probably are involved with cannabis or CBD, that they have a medical diagnosis that they're struggling with. A great deal of them are cancer patients, chronic pain patients, and I help them navigate and get beyond their diagnosis. And so there's a medical piece to it, obviously, just like, anything else that I would do. But we work with them to be able to feel better about their experience and help them through that struggle that they might be going through.
One of the things we talk about a lot whoever we talk to on either the Cannabinoid Medicine Show on Mondays or on our Professor Weed Wednesdays here on Wednesdays is the role that the MD, the medical community, plays in referring or not referring to cannabis as a tool for their patients. A lot of them are afraid they're going to lose their federal funding. We all know about the VA. The VA can't touch it because it's a federally illegal substance. So they love to give out the Percocets as candy to the veterans, and then they get addicted to opioids, and then they end up using cannabis to get off them. I mean, this is a syndrome. I've heard this story over and over and over again. Are we going to get more understanding of the plant and its benefits, and more importantly, accepted by the traditional medical community?
I think inevitably we have to grow in our understanding. So basically, physicians right now have patient populations, and more of them are having medical cannabis cards or using CBD. Being a professional and being responsible, you're going to have to understand what they have and how they're using it and how it might be interacting with their other medications, or how it might interfere with that at some point, right? And so I think inevitably we will have to grow in our knowledge. But your second aspect of your question is, will we grow in our acceptance? I think it's going to take time. I think there's going to have to be more research, though we have amazing research already in cannabis. A lot of time it's downplayed. We don't have the huge clinical trials because it's been illegal for so long. So as we grow in our research, as it is accepted federally, then I think attitudes will change. But I think when there's propaganda, when we're convinced something's horrible, it takes longer for us to change our belief systems than we did in taking on that belief system originally. So time will tell. But I think when the final bell rings, I think this will be a part of what the medical community will see as medicine, and it will be greatly accepted.
And I'm somewhat familiar with plant diets, and obviously this is a plant medicine, and I know the importance of diet. I try to avoid learning about it because then I realize what a bad diet I might have, let's just say. But I did have my leafy vegetables last night. But I do want to go into the research question. You talked about there's been so much research, and yet there hasn't been that much research. The research that I understand that's been done on the cannabis sativa plant has been generated by the substance abuse community, looking for reasons that were negative. And I believe there's somewhat like over 30,000 studies by the substance abuse world. They got their grants to study the negative effects of the plant, but no one's been able to get, not too many grants anyway, to study the positive aspects of this plant. Obviously, if they deschedule it, if we decriminalize it, if we move forward with more and more reform, obviously that's going to open up more research. Where would you, if you got to choose some kind of a research, what part would you choose to kind of look at and study?
So, yes, in the United States, we have been incredibly restricted, which has made things difficult. And I agree with you. A great deal of the research that we have seen is on the opposite side of this, really trying to discover what is wrong with cannabis versus what is right. However, in other countries, Israel has had amazing research, and really what was the motivator for me to get involved in the cannabis industry. So though we might be falling behind, behind the ball, 8 ball, as people say, is in the United States, Israel's been at the forefront of this for quite some time, and that information has been a great deal of what has pushed me further into the industry. As far as what would I be looking for, I mean, currently we do survey research in our office looking at how patients are responding, what they like and dislike about the program, what their preferences are, just to have a better understanding of what our community is. But if I was to go to create more of a clinical trial myself, I'm really interested in the other cannabinoids, the minor cannabinoids that are in cannabis and CBD, and seeing how we can better understand them. We have some information out there that gives us a basic outline of what these other minor cannabinoids might do, but we need more information. And how do we utilize that information better?
Right. So you mentioned Israel. Meshulam is the guy who discovered the endocannabinoid system, right? Isn't that the guy? I think it is. Tell me why Israel, what about Israel? You said it was a great motivator for you. What is some of the research or the people that what is your experience with Israel, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I don't have experience with Israel. What the reason that I ended up getting into the cannabis space is that pretty early on in my career, I was frustrated that for every patient, there was a diagnosis and a pill. If you didn't like the pill, you add another pill. If you have side effects, add one more. And I felt that my training, that I knew more, that I could provide more help to patients, and that patients were also frustrated with this pharmaceutical approach to medicine and illness. And so I started working with patients to kind of approach it differently. I had diabetes, hypertension, high cholesterol patients. And our first step was finding out how they got there, what led to them developing this diagnosis, then really looking at their self-esteem and self-confidence so they realized that they could do things that could make a difference, and then redefining what wellness meant. So many times in medicine, we look at your age, your weight, your cholesterol, your high blood pressure. And when those numbers are great, we say, great, you're well, you're doing wonderful. And then when the numbers aren't good, we say, look, try to get your numbers better. You should be doing better. The problem is those numbers alone are not a great motivator for a lot of patients. Right. So we basically decided I would look at the numbers. There's still viable ways to look at health, but these patients decided what would motivate them and make them determined to change. And so they pinpointed on something in their life that would make a difference and be their motivator. In doing that, and then working on diet and exercise, I was taking patients off of medications about every 6 to 8 weeks and really getting them to a better place. One of those patients mentioned cannabis. And this was at a point in medicine where there's so many homeopathic things are on the market. And, patients ask me a lot, what did I think? So when she mentioned cannabis, I was a little skeptical, a little bit, but I always would do the research and come back. And so in doing the research is where I really realized the type of information that had been developing in Israel at the time and in other places as well, that really just simply showed the medicinal possibilities of cannabis, that there were, this was not something that's taught in medical school. It's not something that is even introduced during residency. This was something that was completely brand new to me. And so the fact that there was this potential that cannabis could lower blood sugars, change white fat to brown fat, that could help fuse bones better after a break, so they're less likely to break it in the future, help with cortisol levels. All of that information was so compelling that I followed this patient in her journey to using cannabis to help with her own condition. I would help with kind of titrating and tweaking what she was doing at the time and just giving her my opinion and background, but she lowered her blood sugar, she lost weight, she was sleeping better, decreased her stress. And eventually, along with some, additional pharmaceutical help, we ended up taking her off of diabetes off her chart entirely. So that was really, it was doing that research that led me to where I am now.
Gotcha. Wow. That's really cool. Let's talk a little bit about the regulations. First of all, the CBD products that you sell, do you get those tested by a lab?
Absolutely. So they're tested. We work directly with vertical cultivators and processors, small batch. So we actually have more of a voice in what our products are, and they do testing on those products. But after we receive the products, we do another level of testing to assure that what we believe we have is actually what is in the bottle. And so that's important. It's the only way of knowing what you're really getting, to be honest.
Right. No, I totally get it. And I also know the importance of telling people don't buy the CBD bottles at the gas station or the 7-Eleven stores, right?
Yeah, I had patients. The reason that we really got into the CBD space is that I had 2 patients pretty early on that, but totally unrelated to each other, that came to me and said, I don't think CBD works. What I have here doesn't work. And the appearance of the oil looked a little odd to me. And the smell was a little strange. And so I just started doing some research, trying to figure out what this product was, where did she get it, what was this? And in doing some research, I realized it was olive oil and caffeine. There was no CBD in it whatsoever. Whoa. And then a couple months later, another patient, this time I kind of recognized it when I could see it and smell it and what have you. And I recommend so much CBD to my patients that I wanted to feel confident about what I was recommending. And so that's how we got into the CBD space.
And would you welcome more regulations in the CBD industry? As you know, everything in Washington right now is all over the place. You know, one agency's pointing the finger at the other agency. You got the FDA pointing at the USDA, at the DEA, and nobody wants to take responsibility for regulating CBD, infusing it into food or into beverages. You know, it's well, everything in DC these days is a bit of a mess. But I mean, do you expect to see some kind of a cannabis czar or a CBD regulation agency that evolves out of this? Where do you think we're going to go with? And of course, this is definitely hypothetical because we don't know what's going to happen in Washington, D.C. You know, tell me what you think about regulations, though.
Absolutely. So I think if you want if so many people are using CBD, right? And a third of Americans are looking for some sort of alternative medicine, and 42% of them are using CBD as a way to get off their other medications. I don't think we can ignore this forever. And I think at some point the FDA is going to have to, you know, make a decision and get involved. And so I do think there'll be more regulation. The benefit of that is that people that may be apprehensive, people that might be buying products that are fake, like the one that I mentioned before, they can buy with more confidence. Right. And so that's important. If this is medicine and we believe it helps people, then let's do what we can do to get that to the people that need it.
Absolutely. And I've been a medical card holder in Massachusetts since its inception, thanks to 4 surgeries in 23 years now. I swear I was an athlete once. I swear I was. What do you think? First of all, you're in Ohio, am I right?
Yes.
How crazy was it in Ohio over the last 3 weeks with everybody recognizing as Ohio goes the nation kind of a thing? Have you ever, in my lifetime, I've never been through a presidential election that has been as intense. It's a good word to describe it.
Absolutely. We're in a different world now, right? So Ohio's always been, you know, wherever Ohio goes, so goes the nation. So that's always been a part of that experience, but it's never been this intense or emotional. Like, it's so personal. That was never really a part of everyday politics for people. People might have opinions, but it was never personal. And so now we're definitely in a different space, and it's going to be difficult to draw back from that. But yeah, it gets a little crazy. Like, you don't spend too much time on Facebook, right? Choose your conversations wisely, and do what feels right for you at the end of the day. So yeah, you can't spend too much time on the news. It'll get you stressed out.
It'll depress you, and you're going to need a little CBD or THC to calm you down and relax. And
yes,
you know,
you're going to need something.
That's pretty much what the day was like, or the night was like last night in the house. So it's been a crazy time. I cannot believe, I say this almost in every show, that it's 2020. I'm in my native state of Massachusetts. I'm talking to people all over the country who are basically pro-cannabis, and everybody has a different field of expertise. And I'm talking about cannabis. I mean, it's just amazing to me that we have come this far, and yet I also recognize that you still have this huge iceberg of stigma that we all have to get over. And I'm sure even though you are in the community, you are still finding that cannabis becomes a last resort tool, not a first resort tool.
Absolutely. I mean, even the way that our program is set up, it is really meant for people that have exhausted their other medical options, to be honest.
Right.
And yeah, and being a new program, most of the people are probably in that boat for the most part. I don't think it will always be that way. Like I said, so many Americans want to move away from pharmaceuticals, are uncomfortable with the laundry list of chemicals that might be in it, and they're looking for alternative, more natural ways of approaching their healthcare. And so I don't think it will always be that way. We're in a new space at the moment, but I'm sure generations from now will look at us and think, oh, this was very strange. But hopefully we're going into a space where we are trying to be more natural and healthier and not focusing so much on chemicals and sometimes ignoring what they might be doing underneath.
There you go. Well, I really had a great conversation with you, Dr. Bridget Williams from the Cleveland School of Cannabis and from your Green Harvest Health group. How can people find you?
So we are Green Harvest Health. Our website is greenharvest.health. Instead of .com, it's a .health.
Yeah.
So that is our website. You can also, I do speaking engagements and obviously CBD and life coaching. And our other website is drbridgetwilliams.com.
Boy, it's a whole new world of weed out there, isn't it, Doctor?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you so much for
it.
joining us today, and please keep in touch, okay?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jimmy. I appreciate you.
Thank you. That was Dr. Bridget Williams from the Green Harvest Health Group and Cleveland School of Cannabis and Michigan State and medical director, and just an amazing person. I marvel at the intelligence level of the people that we get to talk to now on this show. Now, we do have a few minutes to go before our next interview, so we are going to take a break, and we're going to hear some educational stuff from our friends from Cannabis.net. Is that what's coming up? Yes, indeed. So don't go away, and then when we come back, our final interview of our show. Don't go anywhere.
Take me to a world
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the final half hour of Cannabis Chat for Wednesday afternoon. Reminder, we are always live in studio here from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays with a live Cannabis Chat show. Our chat room is open. If you want to throw in a question, we'll be happy to share that with our interviewee, and that's my job here. Reminder again, on Monday, it's cannabinoid medicine. Wednesday, Professor Weed Wednesday, and on Fridays, it's the Green Rush, the business of cannabis, with our friend David Rabinovitz. And we will also be rerunning our regular podcast, my In the Weeds podcast. And this week, I talked with Ashley Elsner. She is the COO of Artery Pay, a new product coming to the cannabis industry, and it's a very simple concept. It's Venmo for weed. And I just think that's a brilliant thing because everybody recognizes what Venmo is. Throw in the fact that you can do it for weed, it's awesome. So check that out. But right now, we are joined by the Dean of Faculty of Oaksterdam University. And if you haven't heard of Oaksterdam University, then you're not paying attention to the cannabis industry because they have 40,000 alumni. Natalie Darvis, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
And the university itself was founded in Oakland in 2007, I think. Am I right?
Yes, you nailed it. So Oaksterdam University is the longest running cannabis education institution in the United States, arguably the world. It started off as a gathering of people who wanted to learn how to grow their own personal medicine. And it has evolved into this really large university where, you know, we've educated over 40,000 alumni. We educate regulators, we educate business owners, we educate people trying to transition into the cannabis workforce. So we have a lot of offerings. We've been around a long time. And yes, hopefully your audience has heard of us. If not, please come check us out. We're kind of a cannabis institution, you know, so.
No, you absolutely are. And you're the first person to talk to from Oaksterdam. So I really appreciate that because I had recognized the reputation of that particular university and wanted to connect with somebody there. You know, I see it says here that you're a master gardener. Now,
I am.
Now, are you a botanist too?
No. So I'm in education for a reason. I really love school. So I've got an interesting melange of degrees and credentials, but I am what is called a certified master gardener. So certified master gardeners are found in every state in the United States, and it's a program usually run by whatever university is sort of the predominant ag university in that state. So in California, where I was certified, it's UC Davis. And, it's not to be confused with this term that people use in cannabis. It's always wrong. A master grower, that is not a real thing. There's no certification available for that. So, but I am a certified master gardener. I have an undergraduate degree in sociology with an emphasis in drug policy. And I have an executive MBA with a concentration in the wine business. So, yeah.
Wine.
So I love school.
Yeah, and you also like wine and weed. Come on, let's
I do.
Cut to the chase. So I visited Napa a few years back, and got to have lunch with a guy by the name of Bruce Cakebread.
Yes, definitely. I met Bruce. Yeah.
You know who? Of Cakebread Cellars, which was kind of cool. We had an amazing experience in Napa for a certain someone's 21st birthday. It was not mine, let's just say.
Are you sure?
Yeah, yes, I'm very sure. And I was the designated driver.
Oh, always a great role in Napa.
Thank you. But no one said anything about being the designated toker either. So
that's true.
I managed to balance. You know what I'm saying? I had just a good time as everybody, let's just say. And safely, I might add, too. Let's talk about the courses of study at the university. Is it in every type of either ancillary business, or is it strictly how to create a cannabis business from scratch, how to grow, how to run it as a business, the compliance issues? There's so many different elements. Do you guys have courses for all of those?
Yeah, we do. So we have, probably one of the most comprehensive, education programs in cannabis anywhere. So we have a business of cannabis certification program, a cannabis horticulture certification program, and then we also have a bud tending certification. We're about to launch a certification for extraction and manufacturing technician. We also have CBD and hemp curriculum. We also have business of cannabis cultivation. So not just cultivating cannabis, but the business side of it. And we also have some courses that are free available to anybody on the cannabinoid crisis, or excuse me, the opium crisis, and how cannabis can hopefully get us out of that, as well as advocacy.
And pardon my live classroom, live webinars, self-paced courses. I saw that on your website. What's going on with our pandemic right now as far as your delivery of your curriculum?
Yes. Well, we had to convert our entire curriculum platform to online in about 3 months. I didn't sleep for about 3 months, but we were able to do it. So all of our in-person learning programs have been transitioned into the academic jargon is called synchronous virtual classrooms. So it's basically, you're going to be able to have a dialogue and a conversation with your cohort, with your faculty member present that day, and all of, the student aides that we have from Amsterdam. And it's about as similar as it possibly could be as if you were to have, joined us on campus in Oakland. So we did the huge pivot, and we're getting great feedback, actually. And what's wonderful about this is now people, even more so, people are joining us from all over the world in our classroom. So our classrooms were already some of the most diverse I've ever seen in education. And now we've just really upped the ante on that. And, I have students coming from every continent other than, Antarctica in most of my classrooms. And I love it. It's just been great. So we're really seeing a lot of success in the virtual learning format. Because we're not a traditional 4-year university, we were able to pivot a lot easier than a lot of schools because we're a smaller institution. And so, it's really worked out for us thus far.
How, can I ask you, in any given semester, what your average enrollment might be?
So our cohorts are fixed to make sure that the classroom sizes aren't too big. So in our semester program, every classroom can only have 35 students. Now we do have all of these online self-paced learning. And so, at any given time, there could be hundreds of students in those particular programs. But for our virtual classroom format, your classroom is always capped at 35 students. We offer them 3 times a year. Our next cohorts start on January 4th. And the 2 programs in that, again, are the Business of Cannabis certification program and Cannabis Horticulture.
So I, too, was an adjunct instructor at a college in Boston this spring semester, March 12th. Everything ended. So we did the old hybrid thing. And one of the biggest challenges, not necessarily in the class that I had, but in learning itself, I'm big on experiential learning. I'm big on learning by doing. In television and broadcasting and radio, hands-on experience is the most important thing you can get. And I'm going to guess, as someone who is a certified master gardener, you have spent some time in the garden growing. Now, and I'm sure you can teach people how to grow, but don't you have to experience the whole thing from the seed through the germination, through the, all the little seedlings all the way up to harvest? It seems to me you really have to have hands-on.
Yeah, so that has definitely been a challenge that we have looked at. So one of the great advantages as well of being in the virtual classroom is that so many of our students are growing and starting for the first time and learning how to grow cannabis. And so they're able to turn their cameras on their grow operations and ask our faculty questions and, get some pretty great responses. In terms of our business course, I am a huge believer in hands-on learning. And so our Business of Cannabis course has a capstone project where you work with a dedicated group of students from the beginning of the term, where you develop a fictitious cannabis business within a certain license type. You have a dedicated business coach throughout the term, and then you actually present your pitch of your idea to a panel of judges at the end of the program. And so you learn a lot of really needed skills and how you would actually operate and work in a cannabis space through that project. And then in terms of, growing, obviously there are always limitations to school. And the most important thing that you can do with your education is employ it. So you get your education and then hopefully you can help transition your career into the cannabis sector and be able to, employ what you learned into your new job. But again, so many of our horticulture students are currently growing cannabis. As we've seen this explosion of, medical and adult use initiatives across the United States, we're seeing a lot of current operators in areas that, aren't necessarily steeped in cannabis culture coming into the space and really needing help and to understand how to grow this plant. And so we have so many current operators in our classroom and it's really fun. And we also have virtual tours, throughout the semester program. So our students visit with whoever's doing the tour, licensed facilities all across the United States.
Wow, that's so cool. I tried, it's the one part of this industry that I don't want to say I've avoided it, but I'm just not as comfortable with it just because of my own black thumb resume. I hate killing a live thing, and there's a lot of responsibility to that. I mean, granted, I think we had something like 5 inches of snow the other night out here in the Boston area, right the night Halloween Eve, and I took in my 2 biggest hibiscus plants from my deck. So I felt like I saved 2 lives.
You did. Hibiscus is not a very frost tolerant plant. No.
So, when we bring them in, one of them we've had for 2 years. So now I'm really becoming attached to it. Right?
Yeah.
But I will say, you look outside and you see a couple of them that, were really, I had no choice. And they just kind of wilted. And there's guilt. There's definitely guilt when you leave a live thing out to be perished by Mother Nature.
Yes. Well, and let's keep in mind a lot of perennials, that is their life cycle, right? They're going to come back, like I had to watch all my dahlias croak in our first hard frost last week, but that's what they're supposed to do. And then they'll come back next year and the dahlias will be even bigger and it will be beautiful. But I understand that. I hate when plants die. I don't even know how, my parents are still flabbergasted that I became such a plant person. I was born in Compton in LA.
Yep.
I did not grow up in one of those families that was all like, let's go garden and grow our own food. It's just something that really spoke to me. Just kind of got really interested in it. But
did I hear that you spent some time in the Emerald Triangle? Did I hear that?
I did, yes. So I was I worked in, so how I started off in the cannabis sector is as a trimmer on a cannabis farm when I was 22 years old. So I'm, I'm getting up there in years, so I've been in the cannabis space for over 17 years. And I started off as a trimmer and then I ended up kind of creating my own little network of medical cannabis farms. It was called Cougar Acres because the main farm that I owned and operated for a long time, there was a female cougar and there was her hunting path through there. That's the tattoo there's Cougar Acres. I no longer am commercially cultivating cannabis, but it's always a huge part of, my heart and soul. And primarily now I actually focus on business strategy and, the sort of the future of a descheduled cannabis America. And, I'm also the, in addition to being the dean at Amsterdam, I help develop a lot of the curriculum and the business program there is kind of a huge part of my role at the school.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. And of course, tell us, it's so easy for me to ask this. Tell us something interesting about the Emerald Triangle, because there's such a myth about it. And people, don't forget, I'm on the East Coast. We're 3,000 miles away. We're talking, right? All we've heard about is that 80% of the illegal grow in the United States comes from the Emerald Triangle. It's 3 counties, Northern California. But maybe we've seen that Netflix series about the murder on the mountain or something, but that's all I know about it. So can you give me what a day in the life might be like in the Emerald Triangle?
Yeah, Yeah, that's a fun question. Okay, so so where my farms were located, and many of them are still sojourning on without me at the helm, is actually one of the most geographically remote parts of the country. You had to go over 2 mountain ranges just to get to this tiny little town. A day in the life. Basically, if anybody who thinks that growing cannabis is like a Burning Man event, they're completely wrong. It's a ton of manual, hard labor. And so a day in the life would be you'd wake up before sunrise because you got to get out there and start taking care of the plants before it gets 110 degrees outside.
Right.
And then, usually you would be taking care of the plants in the morning. You would break midday. You would go eat some food and shoot the shit with everybody. Hopefully I was allowed to swear there. And
the internet.
Maybe go take a break in the river and go swimming, then go back and keep on working until about 8 or 9 p.m. at last light, go home, maybe, have a nice little porch event where everybody's getting together and token up or having a few drinks, and then you go to sleep and you wake up and you do it all over again. And that's at least 8 months of the year.
Wow. And there are people who've been up there for generations, right? Generations.
Yes. I mean, my growing style, I focus on permaculture design, biodynamics. So I'm extremely focused on sustainability and how we can grow cannabis in a sustainable way. And most of my influencers were 2nd, 3rd generation farmers. I had, grower friends who were born on a dirt floor. They didn't have social security numbers. There's a long legacy of, back to the land movement in cannabis and cannabis cultivation, as well as people who really and truly care about sustainability. And that's why they're out there growing cannabis. And this was a lifestyle. And this lifestyle is sadly dying. And, I think that, regulation, even though they were supposed to be helping out and maintaining the solvency of these craft growers, it's not playing out that way. And so, small family-run cannabis farms is one of the last examples of a cottage industry in the United States. And I think it's really important that we preserve that.
So everything out there is outdoor growing, correct?
Well, no, there is also, of course, a lot of greenhouse cultivation, which is also called mixed light by the regulators.
Okay.
And there is some indoor, especially in Humboldt County.
Yep.
But why would you grow indoors if you don't have to? And also, indoor cultivation consumes 100 times more resources to produce the same amount of cannabis material. So it's really important that we promote and advocate for outdoor cultivation because it's the way that we use the sun to grow a plant. And it's the way that we don't burn fossil fuels in order to grow our medicine. So it's important.
It's interesting you mentioned that because there's only one solar-powered dispensary in Massachusetts. It's in Somerset. It's Solar Therapeutics. And when I visited it this past fall when it first opened, I thought that was a great idea. I said, you know what? That's the kind of thing that I think the entire industry can embrace if they're given that opportunity. And I know there's so many regulations and so many challenges just to get up and operational, but I'm a firm believer in, saving the environment and using solar power when you can use it. And of course, they're saving hundreds of thousands of dollars in electricity because I think it's 60% of their power comes from solar, which is pretty impressive.
Great. That is really impressive. Going back to the Emerald Triangle, a lot of the farms there are not connected to the grid, meaning there's no option to actually have public power utilities. I started and ran 14 farms in my decade plus in the Emerald Triangle. And 12 of the 14 were off grid. And so solar panels and, really just trying to conserve energy in any way you can. It was a core component of what we did because, hey, we didn't have the capacity to turn on a light switch like most people did. So everything we did, if we needed power, we had to figure out how to get it.
Wow. Let me ask you this question. I've heard that, and by the way, sometimes we get comments in our chat room that that OG, that old WG guy, he doesn't know anything about cannabis. You said you've been in it for 17 years, 39 out of 63 years. Okay. That being said, okay, I still don't really understand a lot of it, and I'm learning about it, and that's why I like to.
Me too.
Right, and so I want to talk to you about the importance of the water in Humboldt County. And in Maine, as you know, they just went adult use rec like about a month ago or 2 months ago at this point. Who knows? Every day is like a year now. Right? 2020
or an
is
hour. Or an hour,
Right. Yeah. It's the longest year on record. How important is the quality of the water when you put it back into the earth and try to grow these plants?
Well, so there's two things to consider when we're talking about water. We need to consider the discharge of the water that maybe has nutrients added to it back into the ecosystem. And then we also need to consider the qualities of the water that we're applying as an input. So, watering our plants with. So in terms of what we're watering our plants with, it's important that, that water has a relative pH that the plants are going to be able to, use the water and not have it buffer out certain key nutrients. It's important that water doesn't have any toxic compounds in it or doesn't have an extremely high amount of, heavy metals. And so every grower always needs to test their water source. And again, if we're talking about the Emerald Triangle, most people are getting their water from, their local watershed. They're not going to be getting it from a city or municipal system. Right. In terms of water discharge, so again, what happens when you're growing cannabis and there's water coming off of water runoff from your cultivation operations? That is actually the apex of regulations in the state of California, and we'll likely see this throughout the entire country. We need to ensure that, we're not applying toxic chemicals, toxic fertilizers to our cannabis plants, because the runoff from that water can then flow downstream into our ecosystem and have massive impacts on, our watershed in general. So there's a lot of education needed about water conservation, water discharge in the cannabis space. And I think all of your listeners and watchers should, definitely expect that most regulators are going to have a lot to say about water and cannabis moving forward.
Regulations in California, they've had medical, I believe, since 95 or 96.
Exactly.
They just had their adult rec opening up. There's been some mismanagement of whether it's dispensaries or compliance or licenses, and it hasn't got a great reputation right about now.
Sure.
What do you think? Am I wrong?
Oh, no, you're not wrong.
Okay, good. I just want to make sure. So I guess my question about the regulations is, are we going to see your voices, those who are the educators in the industry, those who are the scientists in the industry, are those voices being heard in front of those who make the laws and the regulations?
Okay. Complex answer, but I'm trying to make it simple. So short answer, yes.
Yeah.
Long answer is doesn't matter. No. So I definitely think that, the regulators, I'm on the horn, I'm on the phone with regulators in California, trying to provide advice to them monthly.
Good.
Yep. But does that mean that they take it? No, not necessarily. And so we have a big issue in cannabis, which is, a complete and total public misperception that has been promulgated by the government. And so the regulators need to overcome their preconceptions about cannabis, and that requires education, right? And so we're kind of putting the cart before the horse here in the sense that, sure, they are soliciting the advice that, of stakeholders in the industry, but it doesn't mean they're able to operationalize that advice. And that's because they have their own mental barriers, or they have their own institutional barriers where it's difficult to change and adapt to the needs of the cannabis sector. I was an inspector in the first regulatory system in the United States. There was a really tiny program in Mendocino County that ended up being threatened by the federal government. We had to shut it down. But, I saw firsthand, just on a small scale, what it's like to try to change county policy, county ordinances, and then also at the same time, try to get a group of farmers to move forward and change their practices in the space for environmental, conservationism. And it was difficult. And so on the state level, California is well known as having the largest bureaucracy. It rivals the size of the federal government. And it's been very difficult for this bureaucracy to adapt and change to the needs of the cannabis space. You know, we have more agencies in California regulating cannabis than any other state. Most states are trying to designate one agency to manage it.
Right.
In California, we have dozens.
Yeah, that doesn't make for good government. I'm just going out on a limb here. Well, one agency's tough enough. Add in dozens, and that's a recipe for disaster in many ways. And I think one last question for you. You are very knowledgeable about growing and the whole industry. And all right, what was the last thing that you learned that was a new thing that you learned about cannabis?
Okay, great question. You have great questions.
Thank you.
For about the last 6 years, we've seen this huge increase and impact of pests and pathogens in Northern California on growers. And this is, you know, a consequence of the monocropping that's happening, right? So yes, you know, we all understand that Northern California has been the bastion of cannabis cultivation, but there, of course, are some negative impacts to the environment on that, right? The environment has never been set up to have one plant and grow tons of it in one area that's on a balanced ecosystem. So there's been this plant health issue that many growers, I think, have mislabeled or misidentified as certain pests and pathogens. And the other day, I had one of my faculty members come in the room and note that a recent study is starting to come to light that it's a new virus. And so they've discovered a new virus that's only attacking cannabis plants. It's called hop latent viroid. And I, you know, read through it and I'm like, you know, all of these issues and symptoms that we're seeing in these cannabis plants that everyone thought was broad mites, or some conspiracy theorists thought it was, you know, chemtrails, or don't even get me started, you know, like what people thought was wrong with it. And look, through science, we've now discovered, hey, through monocropping, we've now developed and fostered a new virus that's only affecting cannabis plants. And you see these issues in all agriculture, not just cannabis, right?
Okay.
So
that makes me feel good because I'm tired of talking about viruses. Let's just say.
Yes, but they are a thing even for plants.
That's right. I was gonna say, leave the plants alone.
Leave the plants alone.
Hey, Natalie Darvis, you've been great. Obviously, give a plug to the university. How can people find out about the classes and enroll and the prices and all that neat stuff?
Great, thank you. So we're at oaksterdamuniversity.com. Even if you just type in Oaksterdam, or if you type in Cannabis College into any URL, we'll likely be the first people that show up because we've been here for a long time. So thank you.
Pardon me for just being, as I look at the name, it's a cross between Oakland and Amsterdam.
It is.
That right? Was that on purpose?
It was. So Richard Lee, our founder, he traveled to Amsterdam in the 80s and the 90s. And so, you know, again, this started off as a group of people meeting in a room, you know, figuring out how to grow cannabis for themselves. And then, you know, sort of over the last 20 years, it's become a whole school. And so, you know, humble origin story. And that's, you know, he just wanted to combine Oakland and Amsterdam, and hey, Oaksterdam University.
There you go. Hey, Natalie, you've been terrific. Thank you so much for joining us. And please keep in touch. And anytime you'd like us to talk with another member of your faculty, since you're the dean, Isabel Turner, you have her contact info. By all means, just contact her and she can coordinate all that. We'd love to have a regular presence of every school on this show.
Yeah. I got lots of faculty. So yeah.
Terrific. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you again so much. Appreciate that. Well, that was quite 3 amazing interviews on Cannabis Chat today. I'm very, very happy about that. I give Isabel Turner credit. I give Dan French credit because he pushes the buttons and makes sure everything goes right. I'm supposed to wave to the camera to somebody in the chat room, and I have no idea who it is, but I figured I'd wave and say hello. The chat room, I think, was very active today, which was great since I really looked at it and saw that there were a lot of people talking, and I believe some of you are actually under the influence of cannabis, which is okay, as long as you pay somewhat attention to what the hell we're doing here. Anyway, for everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, I'm Jimmy Young. We will see you on Friday. And also, don't forget our We Talk News, our weekly news video with Kurt Dalton of Cannabis.net. We release that at noon on our Twitch.tv Pro Cannabis Media channel, and of course, our social media pages as well. So for everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, I'm Jimmy Young. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to a very special edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. And today we have a very special guest. Her name is Ashley Elsner, and she's coming to us from the other coast because we start our programming here on the East Coast. She's on the West Coast, but her journey to the West Coast is very interesting. It's a great story. And she has a new company that she's bringing to market that I am fascinated by because even in the elevator pitch alone, I understand that Artery Pay is a Venmo for cannabis. Ashley, thank you so much for coming on the show, and tell us about Artery Pay and how you came up with this idea.
Well, Jimmy, thank you so much for having me on In the Weeds. You know, honestly, like, it's such a great show. I really appreciate what you're doing over on the East Coast in order to spread the word about cannabis and the cannabis industry, and actually the professionalism that people are trying to bring to the industry, as well as, you know, really wonderful medicine for people who are, you know, really need it. So Artery Pay is exactly what you said. It's Venmo for cannabis. So it's completely legal payment processing that is done via ACH, so no card processing. You just frankly link your bank account just like you would with any digital wallet, and you're good to go, and you can pay for cannabis right there.
And yeah, no, I'm going to. You said the word legal, so I'm going to actually give you another kudo here because you are you graduated law school, right?
I did, yes.
Yeah.
I got my JD MBA from Northwestern Law and Kellogg School of Management. Those are out in Chicago and Evanston. Shout out to my Wildcats.
I'm friendly. I like Northwestern. I have dear friends there, and in fact, one of my I don't want to call him a protege, but certainly someone who's a friend of the family, someone who came through my on-camera training, won a college Emmy Award from Northwestern University, and is now
an amazing journalism program. They're absolutely wonderful.
Yes, they do. And now he's in Hollywood looking to create his own show, and we might even be airing it. But that's another story. But you also did some undergrad work and got an undergrad degree from some school in Connecticut that is kind of like Harvard, but it's not, right?
That's right. That's right. I am a Yaley. I'm an Eli. I'm Bulldog Woof Woof.
And I mean, you've had a ton of schooling, so obviously you have a pretty good background on what it takes to actually bring a product to market and a service to market in this particular case, and also a product. But as you know, in the cannabis industry, there's all sorts of regulations. And you mentioned that you must have gone through a legal discovery process on how best to do this. Yes?
That's right. So actually, my background is financial law and financial institution operations. You know, I started with Sidley Austin doing financial regulatory work. That was actually right out of Yale. And then I was at Bessemer Venture Partners doing legal and operations. One of my co-founders has decided to join me now. This is Keanu. Corporate culture.
I understand. And we understand the importance of having camaraderie and a pet camaraderie during this difficult time when everybody's meeting on Zoom and doing business on Zoom. And, you know, it's a total virtual normal that we're getting used to now, I guess, right?
Yeah, he loves to bomb my interviews. Actually, it was very funny. I was on the phone with a potential investor last night, and their kids started jumping on the couch behind them. And they, of course, quickly, you know, like turned it off. And I was actually sitting there giggling because it's kind of refreshing and nice to see people in their own element and in a more personal space rather than, you know, professional. We keep everything professional. You know, we're very, very, I mean, of course, we're engaged with one another, but it's you know, very matter of fact, very to the point, and you don't necessarily see people's humanity. And I actually kind of have enjoyed some of the Zoom conferencing as a result of that, because you get to see people's humanity come out.
Well, there you go. And just for the record, for our audience, our first meeting was not on Zoom. It was actually the old-fashioned way on a phone call, right?
Old-fashioned phone call, good old-fashioned high touch.
And we met through our mutual friends from the Emerald Media Group too, and I want to give them a big shout out too.
Tina and Jill, yeah, wonderful ladies.
they do a great job, and we're about to take their productions to a whole new level. And I think they're very excited about the partnership that we're forming. But let's go back to the product. Let's go back to fighting that stigma that is out there and all the legalese that you had to uncover and discover in order to create this great Venmo for cannabis.
Mm-hmm. So my background really being financial law, financial regulation, really being very comfortable with the state-based approach to regulation, and that really being where I kind of cut my teeth, was in state-based financial law. That being where I cut my teeth, like this was actually not very complicated for me. So when I looked through the legislation, realistically, you can provide legal banking, legal financial products to this space, but it's very complicated because fintech, when it comes down to it, is technology-enabled finance. It is finance. It is not tech. There are rules, there are regulations that are in place, and you have to follow them in order to actually be able to provide the services that you want. And when you start talking with banks about these things, they have a longer discovery. When you're asking them to do a new product, they have to go through a pretty substantial risk management exercise in seeing how it is that they're going to be able to do that and see whether it's actually operationally possible based on their current capabilities to be able to support this space. And one of the things that we actually found was that on the compliance side, while it's perfectly legal to provide it in a certain way, to provide products in a certain way, you can't cross state lines. You have to be really careful about the onboarding process because you have to do enhanced due diligence on all of the businesses and all of the customers. And then when you get to the actual transactions, there's additional financial reporting that's required. So when you start talking about regulations with FinCEN, as well as Cole Memo, which while rescinded by the Department of Justice, has continued to give a framework for what banks view as important criteria for making sure that their operations are run legitimately. And it's a pretty good framework, actually, if you start thinking about it. So, but the other thing about it is you have to report every single transaction to FinCEN as a suspicious activity. And that's a huge overload on a compliance team that is doing most of these processes on a manual basis. And so we actually went ahead and built a lot of that into our transaction system so that you have the compliance side and the transaction unified. And so when we were taking these to banks to actually talk with them about our process, they not only loved the wallet and loved that we were showing proof that we were in fact doing things legitimately, which, fintech has gotten a pretty bad reputation since, all of the initial coin offering, illegal securities behavior, people running off with other people's money and pretending like they were actually raising funds when really they were just kind of fraudsters, cooking up books that happened with Wirecard. I mean, like, there's been a whole lot of mess that's come through the fintech community, and rightfully so. Banks are concerned about that liability in addition to, like, how do you manage the risk of these fintechers in addition to the risk of cannabis. And so we were able to actually prove that process out, show them like we are doing exactly what we're supposed to be doing. And actually when they saw that product, they were like, can we have that? So it's true that we've been called Verifin on steroids in our back office, but frankly, that was really just built for me so that I could effectively, efficiently, and at scale be able to manage our compliance obligations for, running a completely compliant cannabis banking / payments program. We don't specifically do the banking. We actually would prefer for people to have their own bank. It's better for them because you should always know where your funds are custodied. But with the way that we have set this up, we are following money transmitter law. So in all the states where we're required to have our money transmitter laws, we're going to have them before we do operations because that's how we do. And then with respect to our team, we're actually financial professionals for the most part. We all have very personal cannabis stories. Mine is very personal. I am a cannabis patient. That's actually how I got into the cannabis industry, is I saw all of the crazy things that were going on in financial space for the cannabis industry and was genuinely concerned that it was going to derail the legalization process. Because frankly, you have protection at the state level for your cannabis business, yes, but you don't have protection if it turns out that your financial providers were either money laundering or committing financial fraud or bank fraud or different types of, frankly, financial fraud in order to access a system that they have not gotten clearance from the gatekeepers of that system, from the folks who own it, that they're willing to work with cannabis and take on that risk. So we have been completely upfront. We have been completely transparent. Our financial relationships, actually, we're transparent about those as well. We have a public partnership with Radius Bank, a nice Massachusetts institution that's very fintech forward, very smart people. We're very excited about that. And we're able to provide our services really with a federally chartered financial institution backing our product, providing the processing services and providing the custody of those assets. So you know where your funds are.
Right. And that's fantastic. And of course, in this day and age, everything's done, everybody walks around with this little handheld computer and connects with the world. And that's what we all do, right? It's how it works.
It's easy. It makes your life so much easier. And this is also contactless in a space where actually your cards really aren't.
Right.
I mean, when you're going in and you're pressing buttons on these things, or you're like, how dirty do those ATMs look? How dirty do the processing equipment for card processing look? It's just they've always been gross, frankly.
Well, we've all become a country of germaphobes, and for a reason, and we all understand that reason. But there are some certain extents that many of us go to. And yes, I wash my hands pretty much every time I use my ATM card or any other card. Yeah. And I also pump gas with a glove on for the first time in my life too. And actually, I really appreciate that, because I hated the smell when you got the gas on your fingers and all that. It was just, I don't need to go there. You mentioned something.
Keanu decided he had to come back and make another cameo.
Well, as long as Keanu doesn't, have to go out or anything in the middle of the interview, I'm comfortable with that. And
he wants to talk to you, Jimmy. He's excited to meet you.
Well, I'm no Dr. Doolittle, but I do have that ability to chat with other animals. And I certainly, as a talk show host, by the way, I pretty much talk to anybody, including Keanu. Oh, you're so cute. Does Keanu speak? Does Keanu speak? We don't need him. I was going to say that's fine too.
He's the silent type.
I wouldn't be familiar with that one. Let's just say I'm the weak, loud type, and I like to run. Anyway, I want to talk to you a little bit about something you mentioned. You mentioned the Cole Memo. I'm very familiar with the Cole Memo because I literally just wrote a blog about the challenges in the cannabis space, in the social media space, because we too have been subject to censorship by Facebook and by YouTube for 2 pieces of content that we've put out there. And actually everybody keeps telling me, only 2? You're doing pretty well, right? But it was the fact that Cole Memo got rescinded and gave Jeff Sessions, hey, we're going to take down those local cannabis companies in those legal states, kind of showing his federal, whatever it was, moxie, whatever you want to call it. There's a few other things I could call it, but I'm going to leave that alone for now. But the bottom line is it freaked a lot of businesses out that were taking money from the cannabis space. And it was specifically the banking. And it was no coincidence that YouTube, 4 months after that was released or rescinded, if you will, YouTube took down all the money-making cannabis programming and content that they had. They were afraid of it. They took it all down. No notice. And by the way, it happened to coincide with the first podcast that I was looking to put out onto YouTube, and I was told not to, so I did it. But it is an amazing thing to me to hear about. Artificial intelligence is making decisions on content based on certain words. And, and those words aren't alcohol or opioids. They are cannabis and marijuana. And I mean, that's a plant, isn't it? And this is the thing that freaks me out about this whole thing. It's still scheduled as a Schedule 1 as a drug. It's treated as a drug because that's what for 80 years of propaganda, everybody told you it was. It's a medicinal plant more than anything else, and it's been around longer than any of our laws. And this is the facts that are coming to the surface now. And while you have an anecdotal story, and I'm going to ask you about that to tell us your cannabis story in a minute, it still bugs me as someone who is trying to do the right thing and educate the public about this plant and look at the various science and research that is now supporting this green wave that continues to move. It's frustrating, though. It really is. We're still at the very beginning, so we really do have this obligation of telling the stories of those that are in the cannabis industry. And that's why I started this company, and that's why I enjoy meeting people like yourself and others similarly minded people who understand. And I also see in this industry, everybody is very passionate about this cause. And I think that does go to your reasons. Tell us a little bit about what happened to you and how you ended up using cannabis instead of, I'm going to guess, painkillers.
Well, yes, that's true. So I have a condition called complex regional pain syndrome type 2. It is a very, very nasty neuropathic type of pain. It is peripherally located for me. It's in my left leg. It is as a result of an injury that I sustained when I was 23. I ended up with compartment syndrome. I nearly died. It was a very long road to hoe, and it both disabled me in my left leg, gave me substantial weakness. I had a lot of muscle death in my lower leg. I had to have a host of surgeries to be able to walk again. I am incredibly grateful for where I am now, and it's true that cannabis changed my life. I had been living with this condition and barely getting by for a very long time, and they tried all kinds of medications. They tried all kinds of treatments for me. Went so far as to have neurosurgical releases, some of which were successful, some of which were not. I tried just about everything, and finally, my father is a neurologist, and he told me, he sat me down and he said, Ashley, why haven't you tried cannabis? The studies aren't just promising, the metadata is actually conclusive that it works for neuropathic pain. So you should try cannabis. And the truth is, I had never even thought about it. Again, I am a Southerner. It's not that I have anything against it. Don't care, frankly. I'm sort of a libertarian. Anything you do in private is your own business, as long as it's no harm to other people. So right. I didn't care whether other people did it or not, but I was one of those I don't take Advil for headaches. Why would I take weed for pain? Why would I engage in weed at all? Right. It's an illegal drug, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And I, honestly, I was like, what have I got to lose? What have I got to lose? I've been dealing with this for over a decade, and, I have not had any real relief, and it's impacted my life so severely, that I, what have I got to lose? And so I tried it. And after 11 years, I was pain-free for the first time.
And it took you 11 years to get there. It wasn't one of those magical stories that you rubbed on some magic potion and the pain went away. There was
But it did. Yeah. I mean, that was what was magical about it. Right. I can dose once every 24 hours, and actually it gives me enough pain relieving benefit that it's been a complete game changer for me. It has made my life so much better.
Wow.
It was a very challenging time for me. And that's a very personal story. And it became very clear to me, yes, there's been a lot of awful propaganda against the use of this plant. It was completely dataless. Right. It was fear mongering. And, the good news is that we do have channels now to actually get that information out to people in a way that they can easily digest. That, hey, and almost everybody that I know in the cannabis industry has some similar story, they use it for post-traumatic stress disorder, or it doesn't work for me on that one, but honestly, just the ability to sleep again. Right. For all of the other medications that I had been on, which all of them have side effects that are just really difficult to cope with, from gastrointestinal issues to exhaustion to insomnia. They take a real toll on your health. And actually, with cannabis, I was able to reduce some of those. I was able to come off some of them. Some of them I'll be on forever, and that's just kind of how that goes. But, I was able to even change regimens by using cannabis to help me with the withdrawal symptoms that you do have from regular medications.
Right.
These totally legal sources. And yes, I mean, of course, I was on opioids for a number of years there and took myself off of them because, frankly, they don't work for pain. They just knock you out.
Right. That's, a lot of people say that exact same thing, and I've heard that story, not specifically about that compartment pain that you've had to go through, but whatever the ailment is, and they end up on opioids, and especially in the sports world, lots of athletes have gone through this, and that's why you're seeing a lot of athletes, ex-athletes, that are in the cannabis space, because they recognize that this can help, and they'd much rather use THC-based plant material than take a Percocet or a Vicodin or whatever the team doctor wants them to take. Now, I do want to go back to Dr. Dad here, the neurologist, right? Because I want to make sure I heard this right. It was a medical doctor and also your father, a neurologist, and also your father who said, what the hell's the matter with my daughter? Why don't you take some weed to help with your pain? I think that's a great story. And by the way, very rare, as you know, in the medical community.
He's my father. He saw me struggling. He knew that this was something that could help. Now, it's true that the studies that were coming out at the time that he told me about it, and he was reading about them in his continuing medical education, and that's actually where he came up with the idea for it, because it's not the kind of thing that I think on the East Coast, the doctors have been conditioned to look for drug-seeking behavior in a way that makes them concerned about being able to provide this. But the other thing about it is actually the DEA threatens to take away, there is the underlying threat that they could take away your prescriber's license if you do recommend it. So if a patient comes to you and says, can I use cannabis for this? The doctors typically tell you yes, and actually it's a good idea, but they cannot tell you to use it. Now, my father, of course, is not my doctor.
Right.
Sometimes he thinks he is.
That's right.
But he had followed my condition, and, frankly, he had been instrumental to trying to get me adequate treatment, just seeing how impactful it had been on my life and how much it had altered the trajectory of my life. This happened when I was 23. I had to pay off medical debt before I could go to law school. This is, it's been very impactful. And, in some ways I'm grateful for it because I have a wonderful job and a wonderful opportunity to help the world in a way that is instrumental to making sure that legalization goes through and that people can have access to this. Because frankly, without financial infrastructure, no business is capable of surviving. No business.
Thank you for
those businesses. You're not going to get these medications.
Right. Thank you for reminding me about that too, by the way, because I certainly understand that. And, we too suffered the closing of a business account by a bank.
Sorry about that. It happens.
Well, no, it's so funny. I don't know if you're familiar with Kushko. Nick Kovacevic is the CEO of this company. It's a publicly traded company. And he and I did this interview, and it was a great interview. And it is available, by the way, on all the PCM social media outlets. But we talked about having the bank shut down your account. And of course, it happened to me once. It happened in Nick's company 6 times. And I said, oh, God, you make me feel so much better. But I felt like I broke my cannabis business cherry by having my bank shut me down, right? Because it's like, hey, you're a cannabis business. We can't do business with you. And off you go to the credit union world, which is where I am, and they offer plenty of services. And now that I know about Venmo for cannabis, this makes it so much better on so many fronts. I do want to go back to your 2 partners, because I know there are other people on your team. Tell me a little bit about them and how you guys all came together to create this product.
Sure thing. So I'm going to start with Phil because he was the first addition to my team. He's our Chief Technology Officer.
He has a last name. What's it?
Glazer.
Thank you.
I'm sorry about that.
No, that's all right. I know that happens a lot because you're friend. You have that relationship.
That's exactly right. I'll be like, Phil, and they'll be like, Dr. Phil, and I'll be like, no.
Phil Glazer. I get it. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's wonderful. He's a seasoned engineer. He was an old school IBMer. Was doing contracts for the Department of Defense and the FBI during the 80s, and he's an incredible technical talent. He heads our technical team there. He designed systems for Bank of America and Wells Fargo. So like he knows how the banking systems, the internal IT infrastructure is set up. And then he's also, very passionate about fintech and about, moving things forward in terms of the infrastructure that is available to financial institutions, which is another place that I'm very passionate about as well. Because actually our infrastructure in the United States with respect to our financial infrastructure is obsolete. It is obsolete. I mean, you've seen the rest of the world actually already shift over to other systems, and the systems in the United States are still COBOL based. And that's a type of coding language that actually isn't even taught anymore. It's not. And those engineers are retiring, so they have nobody to even service the systems that are like over 50 years old. That's an infrastructure that basically has a limited lifespan, wasn't really particularly scalable. I mean, at the time, of course, it felt very scalable because everything felt really cool, when we started doing infrastructural transaction systems. But now when you take a look at them, they're not forward looking. And, our team has been able to skate to where the puck's going to be in addition to backward integrating into US banking. So we have been very smart about the way that we have approached that. And actually, as a result of that, we are finalists for awards with Benzinga on their FinTech Award program.
Nice.
For best payments app and best use of blockchain.
Wow, there you go.
And we're not a cryptocurrency.
Not a cryptocurrency, that's good, and I appreciate that. But I do, look, first of all, you made a great sports analogy. Second of all, explain blockchain to those who may not be familiar with how it works.
Okay, so blockchain is a mechanism of transmitting data. So it's really a coding and encryption function. So blockchain is a wonderful technology for a lot of things, but in particular, when you start talking about tracking infrastructure, and what you're able to do with that is it's decentralized in some cases, it's not decentralized in others. So you can have it be, infinitely scalable through the decentralization process, or you can also keep it pretty tightly focused with a centralized process. And I'll explain a difference there. So for example, Bitcoin is decentralized in it's very concentrated. People who are familiar with cryptocurrencies will know what I'm talking about. But Bitcoin has, centralized processing, but it's still decentralized. Whereas, for example, Hyperledger. Hyperledger is a company that actually provides, ledger-based systems, but it's still encrypted in a way that is very, very difficult to break into. And it's impossible actually to change after the fact. So one of the things that's really nice about blockchain is that when you bring in the encryption and you bring in the no alterations post-transaction, if the data that is going into the system is taken directly from the source data, like for example, at the source of the transaction, like what we're doing, then basically you have a perfect record of what occurred. An immutable record. So like the days of cooking books are over kind of thing.
Well, that's good. And also, you mentioned about COBOL-based coding and how our systems are obsolete. I'm guessing that the cybersecurity has to be so intense that you feel very comfortable creating something like this, right? I mean,
we're a financial institution.
Yeah,
we're not skirting the rules on that either. Frankly, we have been SOC tested, penetration tested. We have policies for breaches. We are hoping that we never have them, but we go through high levels of encryption at any sort of place where we might have vulnerabilities. And that is not easy to do. We're doing our best, but we are trying to use financial institution level encryption and security processes which are really required by law.
Right.
They're required. And it's something that, if you have any sort of a software-based system, you should be paying attention to your cybersecurity because everything can be hacked.
Right.
Everything can be.
And usually not by people from this country, I might add.
No. Well, infrequently. It happens, though. I mean, you take a look at the kid from Florida that ended up hacking everybody's Twitter accounts, like all of these famous people's Twitter accounts,
right.
And trying to get people to send him Bitcoin. I mean, like, that was kind of, it happens. That is my point. My point is that it happens even in this country. There's a lot of very talented folks out there who don't have enough to do, and so they mess around on computers and figure out ways to break into your systems. And they are very, very talented, unfortunately.
There you go.
So blockchain is a nice way to try to hedge against that. But I mean, the other thing about it that's really nice, because it's a record-keeping mechanism that basically makes it almost impossible to have corporate governance issues. And that's something that people should also pay attention to, because you want to know that the companies that you're working with are on the up and up, that they're operating legitimately, and that they're not doing anything that's going to, make it so that whatever they're providing isn't sustainable. And frankly, you've got cannabis that's regulated, you've got finance that's regulated. So that's like a hyper level of regulation. Like it's a lot. And so you have to manage both sides of that. And, encryption helps you make sure that everything is on the up and up. Blockchain, encryption protects you. Blockchain, the way that coding is done, helps protect you against somebody, not fully disclosing everying.
Gotcha.
And it's encrypted, so you still have to have the keys to be able to get access to that data.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like posted on the internet, but the fact is you can actually go back and review that, and nobody can change the records. So when you start talking about auditability, when you start talking about transparency, you can't do much better right now than blockchain-based systems. I mean, they're fantastic.
Fantastic.
Okay,
Well, that's good.
I want to talk about my CEO.
That's the next one. I know. I knew who you had. Go ahead. Tell me about your CEO. What's his full name?
Steven Gonzalez, and
okay.
he's absolutely brilliant, just a wonderful guy. He's actually originally from the South Bronx projects. He's New Yorican. He's Puerto Rican, from New York.
I know a few people from the South Bronx. What a shock, right? I mean, we all know people from the South Bronx. Go ahead. And there's some really cool people.
He's a wonderful person. He grew up in the South Bronx in the 70s and 80s. And, a lot of his people were running from the popo.
Yep.
Over possession charges,
Right.
And, he saw a number of his neighbors actually go to prison for distribution of cannabis. And they're kids, they're young men, they're, 14, 20, like these are kids, and their lives are being completely thrown away in that way. And so this is a very personal story for him as well. I'll let him tell you the full story another time, but, frankly, he has had to deal with the brunt of a lot of this stuff. Like his community has had to deal with the brunt of a lot of the war on drugs, and frankly, the opportunity to take care of this and make sure that legalization went through. Because again, you don't get you're not going to get a hall pass for money laundering or financial fraud. It goes to national security, so they can't do that. It's not like cannabis where you can get a state hall pass.
Right.
from
That's
the
a great
federal
analogy.
prohibition.
Right.
It doesn't work that way. These are genuine federal crimes that go to national security and go to protecting our country, to counter, basically trying to counteract terrorist financing. I mean, it's really important stuff. So you can't expect a hall pass on that. You won't get one.
Right.
But so he grew up in that environment, and he was really smart, was identified as a good candidate to get a minority scholarship to Exeter. And so it changed his life, and he went to Exeter, he went to Trinity College in Connecticut.
NESCAC, New England Small College Athletic Conference, Tufts University, my alma mater. I always give them a plug when I can. And Trinity's cool too. I played against Trinity. Oh my God. Anyway, keep going. It was a long freaking time ago, okay?
Yeah. And he's got an MBA from USC. again, he was part of, and I forget the name of the program, but it's another one that identifies minority talent, and actually had, he had scholarships the whole way. This is a guy with an incredible story, an incredible backstory, and has seen the upfront and personal. He has seen the impact of the war on drugs, and he's just a wonderful guy. Yeah. Just a really great guy and really smart. He did investment banking for a number of years, and after that, he became like the 8th employee, first adult in the room, chief operating officer, chief financial officer of this really cool, at the time, startup, Deviant Art, which is consumer generated, or sorry, not consumer, user generated content. For example, comic book art. Yep. So how do you monetize comic book art? When you're an artist, you're a graphic artist, people are interested in your designs. This was one of the first marketplaces and one of the most well-known marketplaces to be able to pick up independent art from graphic artists. And for them to be able to monetize that and be able to actually sell that to the public. And so really, really fantastic organization. They were purchased by Wix.com a few years ago. And at that time, Steve started looking for a new project, got interested in this space. And actually, he and I met at a conference where I was speaking on the challenges of banking cannabis, on how to do it legally, and what you really needed to watch out for, because I'm very action oriented. I'm not going to give you the well, it depends answer. I'm going to give you like, this is the safest way to do this kind of answer. And I was working on my project, which was how do you bring the compliance and the transaction together, unify that so that it's not such a cost burden. He was working on the user interface side of the digital wallet to make it really, really attractive and very engaging for consumers, and something that could be a really a fun app for cannabis users to actually also generate content, be able to talk with one another about these things in a safe space that was not going to necessarily, it's artery pay, it's not cannabis pay, This is not going to out people, because people can be very private about their health issues. I was actually, until I engaged in this project and realized that, I needed to actually be forthcoming about my own condition and things like that, and how this has helped me, because people just need to know. And so,
has that helped you? I'm going to guess that has given you a center of confidence and a much more better feeling about just who you are and what you've gone through. You're more comfortable with it now, right?
Yes. I mean, actually talking about these things helps you go through them.
Yes, they do.
And it's hard, because yes, there's always going to be people who are going to judge you. That's going to happen. Yes. But you just kind of have to move past it and live your best life and be who you are. And frankly, I don't actually have anything to hide. I mean, other than the fact that I use cannabis for pain management, I'm so uninteresting.
No, I tell you what, you've been extremely interesting, and I've enjoyed chatting with you. How does it make money? Are you taking a percentage on every transaction? Is that how it's working?
This is free to the customer. So the customer is not being charged anything. It's just like Venmo in that way. For the merchants, yes, we are taking a percentage of the transaction, but we're using normal Square rates. Like we're not doing high risk rates. I have some opinions about high risk rates. I think that they actually incentivize people to hide what they're doing. And so we wanted to be, helpful and upfront and sustainable. And, these are small businesses. They're not able to afford 6 to 12% on the transaction processing fee. So we're looking at like a 2.9% and 30 cents, something like that, 3%, somewhere in that range.
Okay. And are we ready to go? Are you ready to bring this to market? Where are you in the stage of a startup world?
Yes. So actually our partnerships are in place. We are launching some pilot programs that are coming in Massachusetts with some of the dispensaries there. I cannot tell you exactly who they are right now, but there is one in the Rockwood area that we are talking with. There is one that has a store in Orange and a store in, oh my goodness,
Well, we can do the math and do the.
I've forgotten the name of it, but it has a couple of stores.
Yep.
So you will be able to try out Artery Pay very soon. We believe that those programs are going to be launching in the next couple of weeks, probably before Thanksgiving.
Fantastic.
Also, if you guys want to come and talk to me, I'm actually going to be at the NCIA Cannavest thing that's going to be happening. They're doing a cyber summit.
Right.
I'm speaking on cannabis payments and banking. Well, speaking, they recorded it. They recorded it a little bit early for me, so you'll see me be a little bit. This is funny. I'm a little bit less on point.
Okay.
I had one cup of coffee, but was also had not had my second, so it was a little bit early for me.
Now you know that drug, caffeine, is a drug, and we're talking about a plant. Right. And I always use that example when I talk to parents of kids and cannabis, that's illegal. That you're going to end up going to different things and you're going to be, homeless before you know it. And I'm like, it's a plant.
Well, I hope they recognize that I'm not homeless.
You're not homeless. And as a matter of fact, they're starting to realize there are actually a lot of very successul, smart people who have used it their whole lives to enhance their lives. It's about responsibility.
People, but frankly, a lot of lawyers use cannabis, and frankly, the ones that use alcohol tend to lose their relationships, and the ones that use cannabis are actually able to be functioning human beings outside of work.
Wow, what a novel approach. I love that.
It's very funny. It's something that you encountered a lot. And it's a good thing. It's helpful, especially for people who need to, for example, for sleep.
Right.
I think
100%.
One of the big problems for parents, for example, is that they don't get enough sleep, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you do sleep, it's fitful, because there's noises going, and so you're always exhausted. And what's really fantastic to me is that indica strains can help you shut your brain off, and even short sleeps become more productive so that you wake up rested.
Right.
You wake up feeling better and ready to go the next day.
Yeah.
So I have found it to be incredibly helpful to interrupt that I'm worrying about not sleeping. Okay, I'm not sleeping, so I'm going to be in more pain tomorrow. Oh, now I've thought about my pain, so now I am in more pain because I'm not sleeping and I'm getting myself agitated.
Yeah.
So for me, I think that even just sleeping helps to interrupt that pain cycle,
right?
Which just spirals.
Right.
It just spirals.
And sleep, your body and your brain heal when it's relaxed and sleeping. So all that's cool. All right. Hey, look, we've got to wrap this up. Look, Ashley, you and I could probably talk for another hour. You know that, right? And we have one more cameo by your dog, perhaps. Is Kino there? Where is he? Keanu, where is he? Keanu, where is he? There he is. Okay.
He says,
all right, so anyway, Ashley, the company is Artery Pay, arterypay.com. It's there. Yes. You can certainly see Ashley and her two partners there, and it explains what it's all about. And there is a contact button as well. But I just want to thank you again and wish you guys the best of luck. I expect we will be talking with you again. And also, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to my story too, because a lot of people like to tune that out sometimes, and I appreciate the fact that you're a good listener too. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much for your time, Jimmy. I really enjoyed it. This has been wonderful, and we're very excited to support In the Weeds, and really enjoyed being on your podcast. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Ashley Elsner from arterypay.com. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. I'm Jimmy Young from In the Weeds and the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Weed Talk Now, Weed Talk News, and In the Weeds are all available on most major podcast distributors like iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, and our friends at clnsmedia.com and our flagship, Cannabis.net. So subscribe, share, and like our videos on all the social media networks out there, including LinkedIn,